This ghetto trash doesn't deserve to fly first class. Gate agent Diane Roberts hissed these words as she tore 17-year-old Olivia Jackson's boarding pass in two. The burgundy first-class ticket, paid for with 6 months of after-school jobs and community donations, was ripped apart in front of a waiting area full of passengers. Olivia's assigned seat, 2B, disappeared in an instant. In its place, Diane shoved a flimsy economy ticket for 34E, a middle seat by the lavatories. The reason was unstated, but the smug expressions on Richard and Patricia Whitmore's faces as they took Olivia's spot made it crystal clear. Their entitlement, her melanin. Be quiet or I'll have security escort you out, Diane threatened when Olivia tried to protest, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You should be grateful we're letting you fly at all. But Diane Roberts and the Whitmores had made a fatal miscalculation. They thought Olivia was alone, just another teenager they could bully with impunity. They didn't count on Eleanor Vaughn, the retired federal prosecutor in Seat 3A. They hadn't noticed Marcus Rivera, the airline quality auditor quietly observing from 1A. And they certainly hadn't anticipated the collective fury of 200 other passengers who were about to bring American Airlines Flight 1108 to a complete standstill. Sometimes justice doesn't require a courtroom. Sometimes it happens at 30,000 feet. Olivia's background. The South Side of Chicago had taught Olivia Jackson many things. How to recognize gunshots from fireworks. How to navigate blocks controlled by rival gangs. How to keep her head down and her grades up despite a school system that seemed designed for her to fail. But it had also taught her something else. Her voice mattered, especially when she used it with precision. The evidence clearly demonstrates that historical housing covenants directly correlate with present-day educational outcomes. Olivia had argued in the regional debate championship 3 months earlier, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. The judges' pens moved across their score sheets, impressed by the research depth from a public school competitor. When the scores were tallied, Roosevelt High School had its first regional forensics champion in 27 years. Olivia's win had stunned the suburban, private school circuit and earned Roosevelt its first invitation to the National Youth Forensics Championship in New York in over 2 decades. Principal Garcia had called an assembly to celebrate. This is what happens when we refuse to be defined by our circumstances, he'd announced, the pride in his voice making Olivia blush as she stood awkwardly at the podium. Olivia Jackson is going to New York to show them what the South Side is made of. The cheers had been deafening, but reality quickly set in. Roosevelt High's budget couldn't cover airfare for the debate team. The school board offered Greyhound bus tickets, a 48-hour round trip that would leave Olivia exhausted before she even stepped onto the competition floor. That's not happening, Grandma Elaine had declared when she heard. At 72, Elaine Jackson still ran the neighborhood's most successful hair salon, her fingers nimble despite arthritis that made her wince when she thought nobody was looking. My grandbaby's not taking no bus. That evening, Grandma Elaine made some calls. The next day, Olivia had 3 new jobs, weekday afternoons. She swept floors and washed towels at Crowning Glory Hair Salon, where regulars slipped her extra tips and told stories about fighting for seats at lunch counters in the 1960s. We didn't march so you could sit at the back of anything, baby girl, Miss Purley told her while sitting under the dryer. You remember that? Weekends, she ran a car wash in the church parking lot with a team of volunteers, her hands chapped from cold water as Pastor Williams' congregation brought vehicles that had seen better days but were polished with pride. Between rinses and waxes, church elders taught her about presentation and poise. Stand straight, speak clear, and never let them see you doubt yourself. Deacon Morris instructed while inspecting her work on his ancient Buick. Evenings, she tutored freshman math students for $15 an hour, explaining algebra and geometry to kids who'd been told they weren't math people. As she guided them through equations, she practiced debate arguments under her breath, timing transitions between explanations. For 6 months, she maintained a 4.0 GPA while working nearly 40 hours a week. Her debate preparation happened on the CTA, flashcards in one hand, a strap in the other as the train rocked between stops. She practiced arguments in the mirror at 5 a.m., voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking Grandma Elaine. The community rallied around her. Mr. Washington from the barbershop slipped her a $50 bill every Friday. Call it an investment in our future, he'd say with a wink. Pastor Williams took a special collection. "This ain't charity," he told the congregation. "This is how we build our legacy." The neighborhood association held a fundraiser cookout. Even Miss Roberta, who complained about everything from the weather to the president, donated $25 and a dog-eared book of travel tips. The Saturday before her departure, Grandma Elaine counted the money in their kitchen, bills spread across the yellow formica table. $1,427, she announced, eyes gleaming. Enough for a first-class ticket and expenses. First class, Olivia had protested. "Grandma, that's too much. I can fly coach and save the rest for college." Grandma Elaine fixed her with a look that brooked no argument. She'd worn that same expression when Olivia's mother died of cancer 5 years ago, when she'd taken in her granddaughter without a moment's hesitation and promised her a future built on education and dignity. "Listen to me, child. Your whole life, people gonna try to put you in the back of the bus, the bottom of the list, the side of the road. Don't you help them do it." She pressed the money into Olivia's hands, her fingers still strong despite the arthritis. "My mama cleaned houses so I could open a salon. I worked double shifts so your mama could go to college. She worked overtime so you could have those debate lessons. This is what we do. We build for the next generation." Her voice softened slightly. "You fly up front, baby. Show them how it's done." Those words echoed in Olivia's mind as she booked her ticket. First class, window seat, 2B. Not just a seat assignment, but a declaration. I belong wherever my ticket takes me. Airport arrival. Dallas/Fort Worth International Airport hummed with frantic energy on that Thursday afternoon. Terminal C vibrated with 1,000 rolling suitcases, 1,000 muffled announcements, and 1,000 quiet anxieties about departure times, connections, and weather delays. For Olivia Jackson, the anxiety thrummed beneath a melody of pure, unadulterated excitement. Everything about DFW impressed her: the soaring ceilings, the endless corridors, the sheer scale of humanity flowing through its arteries. She'd only flown once before, a bumpy Southwest flight to visit cousins in Atlanta 2 years ago. This was different. This was American Airlines. Terminal C, Gate 27. This was first class. She checked the boarding pass on her phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The screen displayed her confirmation: Jackson, Olivia, Flight 108 DFW LGA, Seat 2B, first class. She'd splurged on a travel outfit, navy blue blazer from Goodwill Ralph Lauren, only missing one button which she'd carefully replaced, crisp white shirt, and her best jeans. The blazer was a size too large, but Olivia had watched enough YouTube tutorials to make the alterations look intentional rather than economic. Her carry-on, a graduation gift from her older brother now serving in the Air Force, contained everything she needed: one change of clothes, toiletries, and most importantly, her debate materials, 3 folders of meticulously organized research, statistical analyses, precedent cases, and her speech drafts. The topic was systemic barriers in modern contracts. And Olivia had prepared arguments examining how seemingly neutral contract language often disadvantaged minority communities through historical inequities in legal representation. The gate area was already filling with the Thursday afternoon business crowd. Men and women in expensive suits tapped urgently on laptops, their faces set in expressions of practiced importance. Olivia found an empty seat near the window, positioning herself where she could watch both the gate desk and the tarmac where massive aircraft taxied with deceptive grace. A businessman in the row ahead of her spoke loudly into his phone. "No, I need the upgrade confirmed before boarding. First class or I'm booking with United next time." He glanced at Olivia's secondhand blazer and carry-on, his expression shifting from neutral to dismissive in an instant. When a seat opened up several rows away, he moved without comment, as though proximity to her might somehow diminish his status. Olivia noticed the pattern repeated as other passengers subtly shifted away from her. A woman in designer clothing pulled her purse closer when Olivia sat nearby. A group of executives lowered their voices, eyes darting in her direction as though her presence disrupted some invisible field of professional belonging. These microaggressions weren't new. Olivia had experienced them in upscale stores, at academic competitions, in restaurants above her budget when celebrating special occasions with Grandma Elaine. The silent question hung in the air around her. "Are you sure you belong here?" As she settled in, Olivia noticed an elderly white woman in a well-tailored gray pantsuit several seats away. Something about her posture, straight-backed but not stiff, suggested authority. Her silver hair was cut in a stylish bob, and though her clothes weren't flashy, Olivia recognized quality when she saw it. The woman was reading from a leather portfolio, occasionally making notes with a fountain pen that gleamed under the fluorescent lighting. Unlike the others, this woman met Olivia's gaze directly when she looked up, offering a small nod of acknowledgement before returning to her papers. The brief interaction, minimal as it was, provided a counterpoint to the quiet exclusion happening around her. Near the priority boarding lane, a Latino man in business casual attire stood quietly, observing the gate operations. His American Airlines lanyard was partially hidden beneath his jacket, but Olivia caught glimpses of a badge with the company logo. He checked his watch periodically, his attention focused on the gate agent's desk, where a woman with a tight perm and permanent scowl was arranging boarding passes. The gate agent, Diane Roberts, according to her nameplate, had the harried efficiency of someone who had processed thousands of travelers and found most of them wanting. Her fingers clacked against her keyboard with aggressive precision. When passengers approached with questions, her answers were accurate but clipped, delivered with the bare minimum of professional courtesy. "Attention in the gate area," Diane's voice crackled over the intercom. "American Airlines Flight 1108 to LaGuardia is currently experiencing a brief ground delay. We expect to begin boarding in approximately 15 minutes. We appreciate your patience." Olivia used the delay to review her opening argument one more time, her nervousness about the flight mixed with anticipation for the competition. In less than 24 hours, she would stand before a panel of judges representing the country's top debate programs. Schools with endowments larger than her entire neighborhood's annual income. Students who had private coaches and international competition experience. But she was ready. 6 months of preparation, a community's faith. Grandma Elaine's words. "You fly up front, baby. Show them how it's done." First-class boarding call. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to begin boarding American Airlines Flight 1108 to New York LaGuardia," Diane Roberts announced at precisely 2:17 p.m. "As always, we'll start with our concierge key members and passengers requiring special assistance, followed by first class." The ritual of privilege began. A silver-haired executive brushed past the waiting crowd, flashing his concierge key card without breaking stride. A couple with a sleeping infant were escorted down the jet bridge. Then came the announcement Olivia had been waiting for. "We now invite our first-class passengers to board at their convenience." Olivia took a deep breath, gathered her belongings, and approached the priority lane. Her heart fluttered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She'd rehearsed this moment. Casual confidence. Belong here energy. The way Grandma Elaine moved through spaces that weren't designed for her. The first-class line was short. The elderly woman in the gray suit joined, standing 2 people ahead of Olivia. The airline employee with the lanyard remained near the desk, checking something on his phone. 3 businessmen in variations of the same charcoal suit formed the remainder of the queue. When Olivia reached the front of the line, she placed her phone on the scanner. Nothing happened. The screen remained stubbornly red. "Boarding pass," Diane Roberts said without looking up, her hand extended impatiently. "I have it on my phone," Olivia explained, offering the device. Diane finally looked up. Her eyes performed a rapid assessment of Olivia, taking in her second-hand blazer, her youth, her brown skin, and narrowed slightly. For a brief moment, something like recognition flickered in her expression. She glanced at the boarding information again, then back at Olivia. There was a hesitation, a microsecond where it seemed Diane might actually verify the information properly and process Olivia's boarding like any other passenger. "Let me see that," she said. Taking the phone, she scrutinized the digital boarding pass, her lips pursed. "ID." Olivia produced her school ID. She wouldn't have a driver's license until her birthday next month. "This isn't government-issued identification," Diane said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby passengers. "I'm 17, Olivia explained. "I have my birth certificate in my bag if—" "That won't be necessary." Diane's fingers clacked aggressively against her keyboard. Tap, 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 tap. Her eyes darted between the screen and Olivia. "Wait here." Olivia shifted uncomfortably. The line behind her was growing. The elderly woman in the gray suit had already boarded, but the airline employee with the badge lingered nearby, his attention seemingly focused on the departure screens while his eyes occasionally flicked toward the desk. "There seems to be an issue with your reservation," Diane finally said, though her screen showed no error messages. "Step aside while I sort this out." Next passenger. Humiliation burned in Olivia's cheeks as she moved to the side of the desk. She knew what was happening. She'd experienced this before, at department stores, at restaurants, at school functions in wealthy neighborhoods. The presumption of not belonging, the artificial barriers, the sudden issues that mysteriously appeared. For 10 excruciating minutes, Olivia stood to the side while first class continued boarding. With each passenger that passed, her anger built, coiling tightly around her chest. She considered calling Grandma Elaine but hesitated. Her grandmother would tell her to demand her rights, to stand her ground. But what if that meant missing the flight, missing the competition, 6 months of work down the drain because one gate agent decided she didn't belong? Doubt crept in. Maybe she should just accept whatever seat they gave her. Maybe this wasn't a battle worth fighting. Maybe Grandma Elaine had been wrong. Maybe some spaces weren't meant for people like her, no matter how hard they worked or how much they paid. The thought lasted only a moment before Olivia squared her shoulders. No, she had a confirmed reservation. She had paid for this seat. She had earned her place. If she gave up now, but what would that teach her? What message would she be sending to herself about her own worth? Diane continued to ignore her, processing other passengers with sudden efficiency. Just as Olivia was about to approach the desk again, a commotion erupted near the terminal entrance. "Arrival of the Whitmores, we're here. We made it." The shrill voice cut through the terminal noise like a diamond through glass. "Hold the flight." A couple burst into the gate area, trailing designer luggage in the distinct aroma of entitlement. The woman, mid-40s with expensively highlighted hair and a face stretched by too many procedures, wore a cream John knit suit that had never seen the inside of a discount retailer. A tennis bracelet winked from her wrist, catching the fluorescent lighting and transforming it into diamond fire. She moved with the confidence of someone who expected red carpets to unfurl spontaneously beneath her feet. Her husband matched her step for step, tall, silver-templed, with the rugged good looks of a men's magazine model 20 years past his prime. He wore bespoke tailoring like armor. One hand clutched a Gucci briefcase. The other pressed an iPhone to his ear. "I don't care what the judge said. Melissa," he barked into the phone, "delay the deposition. That's what I pay you for. I've got to catch this flight." Richard Whitmore hadn't always been this man. 25 years ago, he'd been a promising young attorney with genuine passion for constitutional law. His first cases had involved civil rights violations and housing discrimination. He'd even won an award from the Urban League for pro bono work representing minority home owners fighting predatory lending practices. But ambition and environment had gradually reshaped him. Senior partners at Whitmore, Davis, and Blackwell had taught him the unwritten rules of power. Corporate clients had reinforced the hierarchy of whose time mattered. Country club memberships and executive retreats had normalized entitlement. The idealistic young lawyer had transformed into a man who measured his worth by how quickly others accommodated his demands. The couple bypassed the line entirely, approaching Diane's desk with the casual disregard of those who considered waiting a pastime for lesser beings. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore." Diane's transformation was instantaneous and remarkable. The sour-faced bureaucrat vanished, replaced by a solicitous hostess. Her smile, absent during Olivia's interaction, appeared with mechanical precision. "I was so worried you wouldn't make it." "Absolute nightmare." "Diane, Patricia Whitmore said, patting the gate agent's hand with practiced familiarity. "The traffic on 635 was brutal, and after that whole mess with our original booking." Patricia's path to this moment had been equally transformative. The daughter of a public school teacher and a postal worker, she'd worked her way through state college waiting tables and answering phones. Her early career in public relations had included genuine belief in corporate social responsibility. But marriage to Richard and immersion in Dallas society had gradually rewritten her values, replacing community contribution with competitive status acquisition. "Well, you're here now," Diane assured her, casting a quick glance at Olivia, still waiting to the side. "And everything's been taken care of, just as I promised." Richard Whitmore finally ended his call. "Tell me you've got us in first," he said, his voice carrying the casual expectation of someone whose disappointments were rare and short-lived. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. The very best seats. Diane's fingers danced across her keyboard, her expression shifting subtly as she glanced at the seat map. In that moment, Olivia saw it, the calculation in Diane's eyes, the quick assessment of power, the decision being made. Just one moment, Diane said to the Whitmores before turning to Olivia. Miss, there appears to be a problem with your seat assignment. What problem? Olivia asked, stepping forward. My confirmation has been valid since I checked in this morning. It seems there's been a system error, Diane replied, her voice dropping with artificial regret. Seat 2B is showing a mechanical fault indicator. It's inoperable for this flight. The lie was so transparent that Olivia almost laughed. A mechanical fault. But the flight hasn't even boarded completely. How could you know? These things are logged in advance, Diane cut her off. Safety protocols. I'll need to reassign you. Before Olivia could protest further, Diane reached for her boarding pass. The gate agent's fingers closed around the premium cardstock, and with one swift motion, she tore it in half. The sound echoed in Olivia's ears like a thunderclap. Parrotweed, the conflict escalates. The torn pieces of Olivia's boarding pass lay on the counter like evidence at a crime scene. The clean-edged tear had separated her name from her seat assignment, a metaphorical severing that mirrored what was happening in reality. What are you doing? Olivia's voice was barely above a whisper, shock temporarily overriding indignation. You can't just... As I explained, there's a mechanical issue with seat 2B, Diane repeated, her eyes shifting to the Whitmores, who watched the exchange with barely concealed satisfaction. It happens sometimes. Nothing to be done. Then assign me to another first-class seat, Olivia said, finding her voice. I paid for first class. My confirmation shows all other first-class seats are occupied. Diane interrupted, though her computer clearly showed otherwise. The flight is completely full. That's not possible, Olivia insisted, reaching for her phone. I can show you the receipt. I paid $743 for a first-class ticket. Patricia Whitmore made a small, derisive noise. $700, darling. That wasn't a first-class ticket. That was probably a premium economy fare that got upgraded by mistake. Patricia's comment revealed more than she intended. In her wealthy social circle, she'd observed how inheritance shaped expectations. Old money offspring learned to be subtly dismissive, while the newly wealthy, like Patricia herself, tended toward overt cruelty to establish their position. Each dismissive comment was an unconscious affirmation. I belong in the social hierarchy because I enforce it against others. It wasn't a mistake, Olivia said, her eyes never leaving Diane's face. And I know my rights under the contract of carriage. If you downgrade me, I'm entitled to the fare difference plus compensation for... Contract of carriage, Richard Whitmore chuckled, exchanging a look with his wife. Honey, this isn't a courtroom. This is how air travel works. Sometimes things change. Richard's legal training had taught him to recognize when someone knew their rights. The girl's mention of specific contractual terms triggered a momentary professional respect, quickly suppressed. Throughout his career, Richard had encountered opposing parties who were more prepared than expected. His strategy had always been the same: dismiss their knowledge, emphasize his authority, count on intimidation to override their confidence. Diane's fingers flew across her keyboard, printing a new boarding pass, a flimsy economy-class document that seemed designed to disintegrate at the first hint of moisture. You're in 34E, she said, sliding the paper toward Olivia. Middle seat, main cabin. By the lavatory, Patricia added helpfully. But really, it's not so bad back there. Everyone has to start somewhere. Her smile never reached her eyes. Olivia looked at the new boarding pass, then back at Diane. This is discrimination, she said quietly. You're giving my seat to them because they're white and I'm black. Because they look rich and I don't. The accusation hung in the air. Several nearby passengers glanced over, conversations pausing mid-sentence. An older man with military bearing frowned, his attention now fully focused on the exchange. A young mother pulled out her phone, angling it subtly toward the desk. Watch your tone, Diane hissed, leaning forward. You're causing a disturbance in the gate area. Do you want me to call security? The threat wasn't subtle. Olivia knew exactly what it meant. A 17-year-old black girl being escorted away by airport police, possibly missing her flight entirely, maybe even ending up in a holding cell. Headlines that would follow her forever. Scholarships vanishing. Dreams evaporating. For a moment, Olivia saw dual futures branching before her, stand her ground and risk everything, or accept the injustice and preserve her chance to compete. 6 months of work, her community's investment, her grandmother's pride, all balanced against the principle that had funded her ticket in the first place. Don't let them put you at the back. While Olivia processed this, Diane had already moved on. Her printer hummed, producing 2 pristine first-class boarding passes. Here you are, Mr. and Miss Whitmore, seats 2 and 2C, as requested. She handed them over with a conspiratorial smile. Our very best seats. You're a lifesaver, Diane, Patricia gushed, slipping something that looked suspiciously like folded bows into the gate agent's pocket. After that whole mix-up with our original booking, I was worried we'd be stuck in business class. Richard's back. You know. Happy to help, Diane replied, shooting a warning glance at Olivia. Enjoy your flight. The Whitmore swept past the desk and down the jet bridge without another glance at Olivia. As they disappeared from view, Diane turned back to her. Board the aircraft immediately or stay behind, she said, her voice low and threatening. Those are your only options. And if you create any more disturbances, I'll have security remove you from this terminal. Is that clear? Olivia's hands trembled as she picked up the economy boarding pass. 6 months of work, a community's investment, Grandma Elaine's pride. All of it reduced to a middle seat by the bathroom because one woman decided she didn't belong in the front of the plane. Crystal clear, Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. She gathered her carry-on and headed for the jet bridge, dignity intact but heart splintering with every step. As she moved past the desk, she didn't notice Marcus Rivera, the airline employee, capturing the entire exchange on his phone from a discreet angle. Nor did she see Eleanor Vaughn, who had stepped back out of the jet bridge to retrieve a dropped boarding pass, witnessing the final moments of the confrontation with narrowed eyes and pursed lips. Justice wasn't visible yet, but its machinery had already begun to move. Boarding the aircraft, the jet bridge stretched before Olivia like a tunnel of humiliation. Each step felt heavier than the last, her carry-on suddenly weighing as much as her disappointment. The recycled air smelled of industrial cleaner and faint traces of jet fuel, a sterile limbo between the terminal's bustling commerce and the aircraft's confined hierarchy. Flight attendant Sophia Martinez stood at the aircraft door, her crimson lipstick matching her American Airlines scarf precisely. Laugh lines framed warm brown eyes that assessed each passenger with professional efficiency. Welcome aboard, Sophia greeted as Olivia approached. First class is to your left, main cabin to the right. The words were a fresh cut. Olivia silently handed over her economy boarding pass. Oh, Sophia said, scanning the document. Her eyes flicked from the paper to Olivia's face, noting the incongruence between the girl's carefully chosen outfit and the main cabin assignment. Something in Olivia's expression, controlled dignity, masking profound disappointment, triggered Sophia's instincts. After 15 years as a flight attendant, she'd developed a sixth sense for passengers who'd experienced gate issues. Seat 34E, that's toward the back, just past the wing, she said, her tone gentler than protocol required. I know, Olivia said quietly. Thank you. As she turned right, Olivia couldn't help glancing into the first-class cabin. The Whitmores were already settling into seats 2B and 2C, her seat. Patricia was handing her designer coat to another flight attendant while complaining about the overhead temperature. Richard had spread documents across his tray table, expanding into the space with territorial efficiency. The contrast between first class and economy hit Olivia like a physical blow. Ahead lay beige walls, cramped blue seats, and the thinly concealed irritation of passengers navigating the human Tetris of boarding. Behind her, warm lighting illuminated spacious leather seats, complimentary beverages in real glassware, and the quiet confidence of passengers who never questioned their place in the hierarchy. She made her way down the aisle, shoulders hunched against the stares of already seated passengers. A businessman glanced at her, then immediately back at his phone, the momentary assessment conveying volumes. Not someone who matters to my career. A woman in designer athleisure pulled her bag closer as Olivia passed, an unconscious gesture reinforcing boundaries between their worlds. Row 34 was exactly as Patricia had helpfully pointed out, directly adjacent to the rear lavatories. The middle seat, 34E, was sandwiched between a heavyset businessman already claiming both armrests and a college-age guy with headphones who barely looked up as she approached. "Excuse me," Olivia said, her voice smaller than she intended. "I'm in the middle." The businessman sighed dramatically but shifted his legs to allow her passage. The college student removed one earbud, nodded vaguely, and returned to his music without fully acknowledging her presence. Olivia squeezed into the narrow seat, placing her precious carry-on under the seat in front of her, her knees pressed against the seat ahead. The tray table would hit her chest when lowered, and the armrests, both firmly occupied by her seatmates, were beyond reclaiming. She closed her eyes briefly, fighting back tears of frustration. This wasn't just about comfort. Her debate materials, meticulously organized for easy access during the flight, would be nearly impossible to review in this cramped space. The preparation time she had counted on was effectively lost. From the front of the aircraft came the distinct sound of champagne being poured, the signature pre-departure ritual of first class. A flight attendant's practiced laugh floated back, followed by Patricia Whitmore's louder response. They were enjoying the service Olivia had paid for. The businessman beside her shifted, reclaiming another inch of shared space. "First time flying?" he asked, mistaking her discomfort for nervousness. "No," Olivia replied, not trusting herself to elaborate without her voice breaking. How could she explain that she belonged 8 rows forward, that her seat had been stolen, that the entire system had collapsed around her because one gate agent looked at her and decided she wasn't worthy? The cabin continued filling around her. A harried mother with twins settled across the aisle. An elderly couple bickered good-naturedly about overhead bin space a few rows ahead. Normal people going about normal travel, unaware of the injustice that had just transpired. As boarding neared completion, Olivia noticed the elderly woman in the gray suit, the one who had been ahead of her in the first-class line, making her way deliberately through the cabin. Eleanor Vaughn moved with purpose, her eyes scanning seat numbers until she reached row 34. "Pardon me," she said, addressing Olivia directly. "You were in the first-class line earlier, weren't you?" Olivia nodded, unsure why this woman was asking. "I see him." Eleanor's expression revealed nothing, but her eyes, sharp and assessing, missed nothing. "Thank you." She continued to the lavatory, but not before taking particular note of Olivia's carry-on and the boarding pass sticking out of her blazer pocket. Near the front of the main cabin, Marcus Rivera had taken a seat that offered a clear view forward into first class. His phone remained in his hand, occasionally lifting to capture footage that appeared casual but was anything but. The flight attendants completed their final checks. The cabin door closed with a pneumatic hiss. Olivia Jackson was officially trapped in seat 34E, heading to New York with her dignity in tatters and her first-class dreams torn in half like her boarding pass. But this story was far from over. Settling in, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard American Airlines Flight 1108 to New York LaGuardia. Our flying time today will be approximately 3 hours and 22 minutes. The captain's voice filled the cabin, professional and detached. Olivia barely registered the standard announcements as she attempted to create workable space in her confined area. The safety demonstration began, flight attendants pointing to exits with practiced precision while passengers largely ignored them in favor of phones and magazines. In first class, champagne flutes were collected, jackets were hung, noise-canceling headphones emerged from designer cases. The Whitmores had fully settled into their stolen accommodations, Patricia already browsing the premium menu while Richard typed aggressively on his laptop. Back in row 34, Olivia attempted to extract her debate materials from her carry-on. The maneuver required contortionist-level flexibility. Each time she leaned forward, her head nearly touched the seat in front, earning an irritated adjustment from the passenger ahead. When she finally managed to retrieve her folder, there was nowhere to place it. The businessman beside her had colonized every available inch of shared space. "Excuse me," she said, gesturing to the armrest. "Could I just have a little room to work?" The man glanced at her folder, then back to his phone. "You can use your tray table after takeoff," he said, not bothering to shift. "I need this armrest for my back support." Olivia pressed her lips together, Another battle she couldn't afford to fight, not when bigger injustices remained unaddressed. The college student to her right finally seemed to notice her discomfort. He removed his headphones completely. "Here, but hey," he said, shifting to create a few precious inches of space. "You can put your stuff on my tray when they let us use them. I'm just going to sleep anyway." "Thank you," Olivia replied, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I really appreciate it." "No problem. I'm Jason." He extended a hand. "Jason Thompson." "Olivia Jackson? You headed to New York for fun or national debate competition?" she answered, clutching her folder protectively. "I qualified with my high school team." Jason nodded, impressed. "Cool. I'm just visiting my sister at NYU." He glanced at her blazer, noting its careful tailoring despite its second-hand origins. "You look pretty dressed up for economy." The comment wasn't malicious, but it struck a nerve. Olivia considered deflecting, changing the subject, pretending everything was fine, but something in Jason's open expression made her hesitate. "I was supposed to be in first class," she said quietly. "I paid for it, saved for months, but the gate agent gave my seat to that couple up front." Jason's expression shifted from casual interest to concern. "Wait, what? She can't do that." "Apparently she can. She claimed there was a mechanical issue with my seat. Then I watched her give it to them. She tore up my boarding pass when I tried to argue." "That's messed up," Jason said, his brow furrowing. "Did you get their names? You should report them." Before Olivia could respond, a commotion started several rows ahead. Eleanor Vaughn had emerged from the lavatory and was making her way forward, pausing deliberately at row 28 where Marcus Rivera sat reviewing something on his tablet. They exchanged words too quiet to hear, but their expressions were serious. Eleanor showed him something on her phone. Marcus nodded, typing rapidly into his device. The interaction lasted less than 30 seconds before Eleanor continued forward into the first-class cabin. "What was that about?" Jason wondered aloud. Olivia shook her head. "No idea." The aircraft pushed back from the gate, engines rumbling to life beneath them. The safety demonstration concluded, and flight attendants secured the cabin for departure. As they taxied toward the runway, Olivia felt the weight of defeat settling over her. She should have been sipping orange juice in a spacious leather seat, reviewing her materials in comfort. Instead, she was wedged between strangers, struggling to maintain composure. For a moment, she considered just accepting it. Maybe this wasn't worth fighting. Maybe she should just focus on her debate preparation, make the best of the situation, and let the injustice slide. What difference would one complaint make in a system designed to protect people like the Whitmores and dismiss people like her? The businessman beside her had fallen asleep, his body tilting dangerously in her direction. Jason had replaced one earbud, scrolling through music selections. Neither seemed aware of the significance this flight held for her, how much it represented, what had been taken. Olivia leaned her head against the window, watching ground crew members shrink as the aircraft accelerated down the runway. The pressure built as they climbed, ears popping as Dallas receded beneath them. She closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Then she remembered Grandma Elaine's words again. "Don't you help them put you in the back." If she said nothing, did nothing. Wasn't she doing exactly that, helping them relegate her to spaces they deemed appropriate? She reached for her phone, intending to document what had happened, only to remember it needed to remain in airplane mode. As she returned it to her pocket, she noticed Jason discreetly filming a TikTok, narrating her situation in whispered tones while capturing the crowded conditions of row 34. The gate agent just took this girl's first-class seat that she saved up for and gave it to some rich couple, he was saying quietly. "American Airlines. Explain this. #discrimination, #justice, #first class. The video was uploading as they reached cruising altitude, finding its way to thousands of screens even as Olivia Jackson tried to disappear into hers. She didn't know it yet, but her personal humiliation was transforming into something far more powerful, documented evidence of a system's failure, witnessed and shared by someone who recognized injustice when he saw it. Sometimes change begins not with institutional reform, but with one person saying simply, "This isn't right," and others need to see it. The investigation begins. Eleanor Vaughn hadn't spent 32 years as a federal prosecutor without developing an instinct for injustice. That instinct was currently signaling like a four-alarm fire. From her first-class seat in 3A, she had a perfect view of the Whitmores in 2B and 2C. The couple radiated the particular brand of entitlement that had always set her teeth on edge during trials, the assumption that rules existed for others. Patricia was already complaining about the temperature, demanding that the flight attendant adjust the cabin just for our section. Richard had spread documents across both their tray tables, creating a makeshift office that encroached on the aisle. Eleanor's career had been defined by cases where power was abused at the expense of the vulnerable. She'd prosecuted corporations that dumped toxic waste in minority neighborhoods, landlords who enforced housing codes selectively based on race, and transportation companies that maintained separate standards of service for different demographics. Though retired now, her sense for patterns of discrimination remained razor-sharp. Her mind replayed the scene she had witnessed in the jet bridge, the torn boarding pass, the girl's stricken expression, Diane Roberts' threatening posture. In 32 years of legal practice, she had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of federal transportation regulations. What she had witnessed wasn't just poor customer service. It was potentially criminal. She waited until the seatbelt sign turned off before making her move. With the deliberate pace of someone who knew exactly how much authority she carried, Eleanor rose and made her way toward the rear of the aircraft. Her first stop was row 28, where Marcus Rivera sat reviewing data on his tablet. "Excuse me," she said quietly, leaning close. "Are you with American Airlines corporate?" Marcus looked up, surprised. His eyes darted to her first-class attire, then back to her face. "Quality assurance," he confirmed cautiously. "Can I help you? I believe we just witnessed a Title 49 violation at the gate," Eleanor said, her voice low but precise, possibly with interstate fraud implications. She showed him a photo on her phone, a discreet shot she'd taken of Diane tearing Olivia's boarding pass. Marcus studied the image, his expression darkening. Like Eleanor, his career had sensitized him to patterns of discriminatory service. After 15 years auditing customer experience across American Airlines network, he could recognize procedural violations instantly. Gate agents had discretion for operational issues, but fabricating mechanical problems to reassign seating violated multiple company policies and potentially federal regulations. "I've been monitoring the situation as well," he admitted, angling his tablet so she could see footage of the confrontation from another angle. "I'm already preparing an incident report." "Good. I'd like to speak with the passenger who was displaced. Then we should talk to the lead flight attendant." Marcus nodded, entering something into his report. "Seat 34E. I'll meet you in the forward galley in 10 minutes. Eleanor continued to the back of the aircraft, locating in row 34. Olivia sat wedged between two passengers, attempting to review papers balanced precariously on her lap. The girl looked up as Eleanor approached. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the precise diction of someone accustomed to courtroom acoustics. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Olivia's expression was wary. About what happened at the gate?" Eleanor replied, gesturing toward the rear galley. "In private, if possible." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. She excused herself past the businessman, who grumbled but shifted his legs. In the small space near the lavatories, Eleanor introduced herself. "My name is Eleanor Vaughn. I'm a retired federal prosecutor with the Justice Department's Transportation Division. I saw what happened with your boarding pass." Olivia's posture stiffened. "You did, yes. And I'd like you to know that what occurred was not just unethical. It was potentially illegal. Would you be willing to tell me exactly what the gate agent said to you?" For a moment, Olivia seemed torn between hope and suspicion. Throughout her life, authority figures had often promised assistance only to disappear when action was required. But something about Eleanor's direct gaze and professional demeanor suggested genuine commitment. "She said there was a mechanical issue with my seat," Olivia began, her voice gaining strength as she recounted the incident. "But then I watched her assign that exact seat to the Whitmores. When I tried to show her my confirmation, she tore my boarding pass in half. Then she threatened to call security if I didn't cooperate." Eleanor nodded, making mental notes. "Did you see any money change hands between the Whitmores and Ms. Roberts?" "I'm not certain," Olivia answered carefully. but Mrs. Whitmore definitely put something in Diane's pocket while thanking her for the seats. As Olivia spoke, another passenger approached, a flight attendant Eleanor recognized from first class. "Excuse me," the woman said, her name tag reading Sophia Martinez. "Is everything all right back here?" Eleanor made a split-second assessment of Sophia's demeanor, concerned rather than confrontational. "Actually, no. We're discussing a serious incident that occurred during boarding. This young woman had her confirmed first-class seat taken from her under questionable circumstances." Sophia's eyes widened slightly as she looked at Olivia. "You were supposed to be in first class." "Yes," Olivia replied, upon verified, producing her torn boarding pass from her pocket. "Seat 2B, the gate agent said there was a mechanical issue, but then she gave the seat to a couple who arrived late." Sophia examined the torn boarding pass, her professional smile fading. "This isn't standard procedure, though," she said slowly. "Even if there was an actual mechanical issue, you should have been reseated within the same cabin or offered compensation." "There was no mechanical issue," Eleanor stated flatly. "It was a fabrication to accommodate the Whitmores, who appear to have some relationship with the gate agent." Sophia's expression hardened. She had joined American Airlines after experiencing discriminatory treatment as a passenger herself. A flight attendant had assumed she was traveling to the back galley rather than to her first-class seat. That experience had shaped her commitment to treating all passengers with equal respect. "I'll speak with Michael, our lead flight attendant," she said decisively. "This needs to be documented properly." Meanwhile, in row 28, Jason Thompson was reviewing the video he'd captured. The footage clearly showed Olivia's cramped conditions and included a brief narration of what had happened. He added hashtags, #American Airlines, #Justice for Olivia, #first-class theft, and posted it to TikTok, where it immediately began gathering views. His caption added context. "Gate agent stole this black teen's first-class seat that she paid for and saved up for months to buy. Gave it to rich white couple who arrived late. American Air, what are you going to do about this?" The initial response was explosive. Comments poured in. "This is outrageous. American Air needs to fix this now. I've seen this happen before. Airlines think they can get away with it. That poor girl. Someone help her." Further forward, Marcus Rivera had moved to the forward galley, where he discreetly showed his airline credentials to the lead flight attendant. "Michael Chen, we may have a situation requiring the captain's attention." Marcus explained, keeping his voice low. "A passenger had her first-class seat improperly reassigned by the gate agent. There's evidence suggesting discriminatory intent and possible fraud." Michael's expression remained professional, but his eyes revealed concern. "I'll need to inform the captain. We have strict protocols for these situations." As these conversations unfolded in separate parts of the aircraft, Patricia Whitmore's voice carried from first class, loud enough that passengers in the first few rows of economy could hear her clearly. "Really, the service has gone downhill," she complained to anyone within earshot. "In the old days, they knew how to treat their premium passengers. Now they let just anyone up here if they save enough coins from their piggy bank." The comment, meant to be overheard, sent ripples of discomfort through nearby passengers. Several reached for their phones, sensing the atmosphere of brewing conflict. The investigation was no longer just beginning. It was accelerating. The confrontation builds. 40 minutes into the flight, a quiet revolution was taking shape at 30,000 feet. What had begun as isolated conversations in different sections of the aircraft was coalescing into coordinated action. Eleanor Vaughn had returned to her seat in first class, her legal pad now filled with notes from her conversation with Olivia. From her vantage point, she could observe the Whitmores continuing to make themselves the center of the first-class experience. Patricia had already sent back her meal inedible, demanded a different type of wine, "Don't you have any actual French labels?" and repeatedly used the call button for trivial requests. Each interaction revealed something Eleanor had observed in countless defendants throughout her career: the compulsion to assert dominance through constant demands, to create separation between themselves and those they considered inferior. The behavior wasn't just annoying, it was diagnostic of the same entitlement mentality that had led them to take Olivia's seat. Marcus Rivera had taken a seat in the last row of first class after a brief conversation with the captain through Michael Chen. His quality assurance credentials granted him access to all cabins. and he was using this privilege to document the Whitmore's behavior while maintaining a direct line of communication with the cockpit. In the middle of the main cabin, Jason Thompson's TikTok video had exploded. His phone vibrated continuously with notifications as the view count climbed past 50,000. Comments poured in, most expressing outrage and urging other passengers to take action. Jason had already created a follow-up video, interviewing passengers nearby who had witnessed Olivia's displacement. "They really just took her seat and sent her to the back," confirmed a middle-aged woman in row 36. "I saw the whole thing at the gate. That poor girl paid for first class, and they treated her like she didn't deserve to be there." A businessman from row 30 added his perspective. "I travel weekly for work. What that gate agent did was completely against protocol. There's a specific procedure for handling seating issues, and tearing up someone's boarding pass, isn't it?" The videos were being shared across platforms, from TikTok to Twitter, Instagram to Facebook. As the plane cruised over Tennessee, Olivia's experience was reaching hundreds of thousands of viewers on the ground. Inside the aircraft, the story spread through whispered conversations and shared phone screens. Passengers who had been isolated in their travel bubbles began connecting, comparing observations, and forming a collective understanding of the injustice that had occurred. Sofia Martinez moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, but her routine service had acquired a new purpose. As she distributed beverages in the main cabin, she quietly alerted key crew members about the developing situation. When she reached row 34, she leaned down to speak to Olivia. "Miss Jackson," she said quietly, "the lead flight attendant would like to speak with you when you have a moment. And I brought you this." She discreetly handed Olivia a first-class meal and a glass of premium orange juice. "It's the least we can do for now." Olivia accepted the gesture with grateful surprise. "Thank you." The businessman beside her took notice. "How come she gets special food?" "Service recovery," Sophia replied smoothly, her tone foreclosing further discussion. She moved on before he could protest further. Near the front of the main cabin, passengers had begun quietly discussing what they'd witnessed or heard. A retired teacher in row 8 had seen the entire gate interaction and was sharing details with her seatmates. A young couple who had arrived late in the boarding process had overheard Diane Roberts' threat to call security. Piece by piece, the story was spreading throughout the aircraft. In first class, the atmosphere was shifting. Several passengers had noticed Eleanor's purposeful movements in Marcus's official tablet. The Whitmores remained oblivious, insulated by their entitlement. Richard was on his third scotch, his voice growing louder with each glass. Patricia had struck up a conversation with another passenger, making pointed comments about standard slipping and the importance of keeping first class exclusive. Eleanor had heard enough. With the deliberate timing of someone accustomed to courtroom dramatics, she rose from her seat and approached the Whitmores directly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by surrounding passengers. "I believe you're sitting in a stolen seat?" The statement landed like a grenade. Conversations ceased, heads turned. Patricia Whitmore's face contorted in shock. "I beg your pardon." "Seat 2B," Eleanor continued calmly, "was purchased by Olivia Jackson, a 17-year-old student traveling to a national debate competition. The gate agent, Diane Roberts, illegally reassigned it to you after fabricating a mechanical issue." Richard Whitmore's face flushed red. "How dare you? Who do you think you are?" Eleanor Vaughn, retired federal prosecutor, Department of Justice Transportation Division. She presented a business card with practiced precision, and I witnessed the entire incident, as did several other passengers. Patricia's expression shifted from outrage to calculation. "Look, we don't know anything about that. Diane is an old friend who was simply helping us after a mix-up with our original booking. If there was some confusion with another passenger, that's hardly our fault." "Confusion?" Eleanor's eyebrow arched. "The gate agent tore up a minor's confirmed boarding pass and threatened her with security when she attempted to assert her rights. That goes well beyond confusion. Mrs. Whitmore." By now, Michael Chen had appeared at Eleanor's side. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Eleanor replied before the Whitmores could speak. "These passengers are occupying a seat that was fraudulently reassigned. The legitimate ticket holder is currently seated in 34E. Michael maintained his professional demeanor, though his eyes revealed he was already aware of the situation. "I see, and Mrs. Whitmore," could I see your boarding passes? Please. Patricia reluctantly produced their boarding passes, which clearly showed seats 2B and 2C. Everything is in order. This woman is causing a scene over nothing. Nothing. Eleanor's voice took on the edge that had made witness stand confessions. I have photographs of Diane Roberts tearing up Miss Jackson's boarding pass. I have witness statements from passengers who overheard your conversation with the gate agent. And I believe, what bad she glanced at Marcus Rivera, who nodded confirmation. The airline's quality assurance representative has video documentation of the entire incident. The Whitmore's confident expressions faltered. Around them, other first-class passengers were openly staring, many with phones discreetly recording the confrontation. This is ridiculous, Richard blustered, attempting to regain control. We're frequent flyers, platinum status. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with American Airlines, which makes it all the more shocking that you'd participate in depriving a minor of her rightfully purchased seat, Eleanor replied, especially given your professional background. Mr. Whitmore, the Texas Bar Association takes a dim view of attorneys participating in fraud. The mention of his profession in the Bar Association struck a nerve. Richard's face paled slightly. Now wait just a minute. You're making accusations without... I'm stating facts, Eleanor interrupted. Facts that will be included in my formal complaint to the Department of Transportation, the FAA, and American Airlines corporate offices. She turned to Michael. I believe the captain needs to be fully briefed on this situation. This isn't simply a seating dispute. It's a potential violation of federal transportation law with discrimination implications. Michael nodded, his decision already made. I'll inform the captain immediately. In the meantime, I'd ask everyone to remain seated until we can resolve this situation. As he moved toward the cockpit, Richard grabbed his arm. Now hold on. Do you know who I am? I can make one phone call and have your job. The threat hung in the air, witnessed by dozens of passengers. Michael gently removed Richard's hand from his uniform. Sir, please do not touch the flight crew. That's a federal offense. His voice remained measured but firm. I'll be back shortly. As Michael disappeared into the cockpit, the confrontation had officially escalated from a private dispute to an aircraft-wide incident. In the main cabin, Olivia sat perfectly still, aware that something significant was happening, but unable to see the details unfolding in first class. Jason leaned over. It's going viral, he whispered, showing her his phone. The view count had reached 127,000. People are furious on your behalf. Olivia stared at the screen, watching strangers defend her rights in the comment section. For the first time since Diane had torn her boarding pass, she felt something other than helplessness. The confrontation wasn't just building, it was about to erupt. Captain's involvement, Captain Michael Bennett, had been flying commercial aircraft for 27 years. In that time, he'd handled medical emergencies, severe turbulence, equipment malfunctions, and the occasional disruptive passenger. But the situation currently unfolding in his aircraft presented a unique challenge. Lead flight attendant Michael Chen stood in the cockpit, his report concise and troubling. So to summarize, Captain Bennett said, processing the information, we have a 17-year-old passenger whose first-class seat was fraudulently reassigned by our gate agent, possibly due to racial discrimination. The seat was given to a couple who appear to have paid a bribe. We have photographic and video evidence of the incident, as well as a retired federal prosecutor involved. Meanwhile, half the cabin is aware something's happening, and it's trending on social media. Does that cover it? Yes, sir. Michael confirmed. Quality assurance is already documenting everything. The Whitmores are becoming increasingly belligerent. Mr. Whitmore physically grabbed my arm when I attempted to notify you. First Officer Jessica Rodriguez looked up from the instruments. That's assault on a crew member. Yes, Michael agreed, though I'd classify it as minor at this point. Captain Bennett considered the options. FAA regulations gave him ultimate authority over the aircraft and everyone aboard. This wasn't just a customer service issue, it had legal implications. Here's how we'll handle this, he decided. First, I'll make an announcement about our brief delay to address a seating issue. That gives us cover to resolve this without creating panic. Second, I want Miss Jackson moved to an open premium economy seat immediately as a temporary measure. Third, I'll come out and speak directly with all parties involved. The Whitmores won't go quietly, Michael warned. They don't have to go quietly, Bennett replied. But they will go. Radio ahead to LaGuardia. Tell them we'll need a customer service team and possibly airport police upon arrival. Captain Bennett had risen through the ranks during an era of significant change in commercial aviation. Early in his career, he'd witnessed the casual discrimination that once characterized air travel, the assumptions about who belonged in premium cabins, the selective enforcement of policies based on appearance or accent. He'd made a personal commitment to ensure equal treatment for all passengers under his command, regardless of their appearance or background. As Michael returned to the cabin, Captain Bennett activated the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're currently making excellent progress toward New York, but I've been informed of a seating issue that requires my attention. We'll be maintaining our current altitude and heading while we address this matter. Flight attendants, please pause service temporarily. Thank you for your patience. The announcement, deliberately vague, nevertheless sent a ripple of tension through the aircraft. In first class, the Whitmores exchanged nervous glances. In row 34, Olivia felt her heart rate accelerate. Sophia appeared at Olivia's row. Miss Jackson, would you come with me, please? The businessman beside her grumbled as Olivia squeezed past. Sophia led her to an empty seat in the premium economy section. Please wait here, Sophia said kindly. The captain would like to speak with you shortly. As Olivia settled into the significantly more comfortable seat, she noticed passengers watching her with open curiosity. Some offered encouraging smiles. Others were openly recording on their phones. Jason's TikTok had spread through the cabin like wildfire, and now everyone knew who she was and why she'd been moved. In first class, the atmosphere had grown tense. Eleanor Vaughn stood near the bulkhead, conferring quietly with Marcus Rivera as they reviewed evidence on their devices. The Whitmores remained in seats 2B and 2C, but their earlier bravado had been replaced with defensive posturing. This is ridiculous, Patricia hissed to her husband. They can't just interrogate us like criminals over a simple seating change. Shut up, Patricia, Richard muttered, scanning his email with growing agitation. Let me handle this. The cockpit door opened, and Captain Bennett emerged. In his late 50s with silver temples and the composed demeanor of someone who had navigated countless crises, he surveyed the cabin briefly before approaching the center of first class. Good afternoon, Haya, he began, his voice carrying the natural authority of command. I understand we have a situation regarding seat 2B. I'd like to resolve this quickly and fairly for all involved. Richard Whitmore immediately attempted to seize control of the narrative. Captain, this is being blown completely out of proportion. We're frequent flyers who were assisted by a gate agent we've known for years. If there was some miscommunication about the seating, we're happy to discuss compensation for the other passenger, but this public spectacle is unnecessary and potentially defamatory. Captain Bennett listened without interruption, his expression neutral. When Richard finished, Bennett turned to Eleanor. Ma'am, I understand you witnessed the incident at the gate. Yes, Captain, Eleanor replied. I observed the gate agent, Diane Roberts, tear up a valid first-class boarding pass belonging to Olivia Jackson, a minor traveling alone. She then reassigned seat 2B to Mr. and Miss Whitmore after receiving what appeared to be a cash payment. When Miss Jackson attempted to assert her rights, she was threatened with security intervention. That's a lie, Patricia interjected. We did not pay. Captain Bennett raised a hand, silencing her. Mr. Rivera, as our quality assurance representative, what have you documented? Marcus stepped forward, his tablet displaying a timeline of events. I have video confirmation of the boarding pass being destroyed, the verbal threat to call security, and the reassignment of seat 2B. I've also verified through our system that Miss Jackson's original assignment was legitimate and no mechanical issue was logged for her seat. Additionally, I've noted multiple violations of company policy regarding seat assignments, customer communication, and treatment of minors traveling alone. Bennett nodded, absorbing the information. And where is Miss Jackson now? I've temporarily moved her to premium economy, Sophia reported. Seat 12D. Thank you. Bennett turned back to the Whitmores. Based on the evidence presented, it appears that seat 2B was improperly reassigned. As captain, I have final authority over all seating arrangements on this aircraft. I'm officially reinstating Miss Jackson to her originally purchased seat, 2B. Richard's face flushed dark red. You can't do that. We have boarding passes for these seats. Boarding passes obtained through improper means, Bennett corrected. I have the authority and the obligation to correct this situation. You have two options. You may move to premium economy seats for the remainder of the flight, or you may be deplaned upon arrival with the assistance of airport police to address the allegations of bribery, fraud, and crew interference. This is outrageous. Patricia's voice rose to a shout. Do you know who my husband is? He's a senior partner at Whitmore, Davis, and Blackwell. We'll sue this airline into bankruptcy. Her outburst attracted attention from throughout the cabin. Phones appeared, recording the confrontation. In premium economy, Olivia could hear the commotion, but couldn't see what was happening. Captain Bennett remained impassive. Mrs. Whitmore, threatening the crew or disrupting the flight will only worsen your situation. My decision is final. You're being offered premium economy as a courtesy. The alternative is a meeting with airport police in New York. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice pitched for the Whitmores alone. Richard, as an attorney, you should recognize when to cut your losses. The evidence is overwhelming. There are multiple witnesses, and your conduct is potentially actionable under both federal transportation law and state bar ethics guidelines. For a moment, it seemed Richard might continue arguing. Then, with visible effort, he controlled himself. Fine, we'll move, under protest. But this isn't over. Thank you for your cooperation, Bennett replied, signaling to Michael and Sophia. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore to premium economy and assist Miss Jackson in returning to her original seat. As the flight attendants moved to execute his instructions, Bennett addressed the first-class cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during this disruption. We'll be resuming normal service shortly. He then walked to premium economy, where Olivia sat watching the proceedings with wide eyes. Miss Jackson, he said, his tone gentler than the one he'd used with the Whitmores. I understand you purchased seat 2B for this flight to attend a debate competition in New York. Yes, sir, Olivia replied, still processing the rapid turn of events. On behalf of American Airlines, I want to apologize for what happened at the gate. It was unacceptable, discriminatory, and contrary to our values. Your seat is being prepared for you now. Would you like to return to first class? Olivia hesitated, overwhelmed by the public nature of the conflict. Will there be more trouble? Bennett shook his head. No, the matter is settled. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore will remain in premium economy for the duration of the flight. When we land, there will be customer service representatives waiting to ensure you're properly accommodated. As Olivia gathered her belongings, Jason caught her eye from row 34. He gave her a thumbs up, mouthing, "You won." His phone continued recording, capturing the moment of vindication for his now viral TikTok. With Sophia escorting her, Olivia moved forward through the cabin. Passengers watched her pass, many offering encouraging nods or whispered support. The walk felt symbolic, a reversal of her earlier humiliation, a restoration of dignity. When she reached first class, she saw the Whitmores being settled into premium economy, their expressions thunderous. Eleanor Vaughn stood near seat 3A, a small smile of satisfaction on her face. Marcus Rivera continued documenting the resolution with professional detachment. Here we are, Miss Jackson, Sophia said, gesturing to seat 2B. Your original seat. Can I get you anything to drink once you're settled? Olivia slid into the spacious leather seat, her seat, feeling the full weight of what had just transpired. She had been wronged, witnessed, defended, and vindicated, all at 30,000 feet above the earth. Orange juice, please, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. No ice when in Parrot Wheat 3, the showdown. The news traveled through the aircraft like an electrical current. Whispers passed from row to row, seat to seat, passenger to passenger. The girl got her seat back. The captain intervened. The couple got demoted. In premium economy, the Whitmores seethed. Their physical displacement from first class to row 12 represented more than a change in seating category. It was a public demotion, a visible stripping of status. Richard had already fired off 3 emails to contacts at American Airlines corporate headquarters. Patricia alternated between hissing complaints to her husband and shooting venomous glares toward first class. The victory, however, felt incomplete to many passengers. The initial injustice had been partially remedied, but the responsible parties had faced minimal consequences. The Whitmores had lost their stolen seats but suffered no real penalty. Diane Roberts, the gate agent who had initiated the discrimination, remained unscathed back in Dallas. What began as individual discomfort with this imbalance soon coalesced into something more powerful. Passengers who had witnessed the injustice began connecting, first through whispered conversations, then through more open discussions. The arbitrary nature of what had happened to Olivia, that a qualified paying customer could be displaced based solely on appearance and presumption, struck a chord that transcended typical travel annoyances. Eleanor Vaughn sensed this undercurrent of dissatisfaction. As a prosecutor, she understood that justice required not just restoration, but accountability. She returned to her seat in 3A, positioned diagonally across from Olivia in 2B, and considered her next move. Meanwhile, Jason Thompson's TikTok continued its viral journey. The view count had surpassed 250,000, with users demanding updates. He created a news video from his economy seat, narrating the captain's intervention and Olivia's return to first class. The hashtag Justice for Olivia was trending in several major cities. Update Captain Bennett just stepped in and gave Olivia her rightful seat back, Jason reported, keeping his voice low. The Whitmores got moved to premium economy, but this isn't over. They threatened the captain, grabbed a flight attendant, and still haven't faced real consequences for stealing a minor's seat. As this digital documentation spread beyond the aircraft, passengers throughout the cabin began sharing their perspectives. A middle-aged woman in row 17 recounted witnessing Diane Roberts tear up Olivia's boarding pass. A businessman in row 22 described the Whitmores' entitled behavior during boarding. A teacher from row 32 explained the significance of Olivia's debate competition and the community effort that had funded her ticket. These individual accounts merged into a collective narrative, not just about one-seat reassignment, but about systems that enabled discrimination, about who was presumed to belong in premium spaces, about the casual confidence with which some passengers' rights were dismissed while others' preferences were prioritized. Marcus Rivera had moved to a jump seat in the forward galley, where he could continue his documentation while staying out of the main cabin. His tablet contained dozens of witness statements, videos, and system logs that would form the backbone of an internal investigation. As a quality auditor with 15 years at American Airlines, he had seen his share of customer service failures, but rarely one so blatant or so thoroughly documented. The collective awareness of the incident had transformed individual passengers into a community united by their witness to injustice. Strangers who had ignored each other during boarding now leaned across aisles to share observations and opinions. Phones passed between seats as people showed each other Jason's viral videos and the rapidly growing social media response. In seat 23F, a tech executive called her assistant using the in-flight Wi-Fi. "Find me everything you can on Richard Whitmore of Whitmore, Davis, and Blackwell," she instructed, "and see who sits on their client ethics board." In row 17, a journalism professor from Columbia was already drafting an article about the incident for his media ethics blog. 3 flight attendants huddled in the rear galley, discussing how the events would affect Diane Roberts. "She's done," the most senior among them predicted. "Discrimination, fraud, destroying federal documents. They'll terminate her before this plane lands." The momentum was building. What had begun as one teenager's humiliation was evolving into a collective demand for justice. The aircraft had become an isolated ecosystem of moral clarity, a sealed container where right and wrong were starkly defined, and public opinion had aligned firmly on the side of right. Captain Bennett emerged from the cockpit again, this time to speak with Eleanor Vaughn. "Ms. Vaughn," he said, taking the empty seat beside her, "our ground team is preparing a formal incident report. They've asked if you'd be willing to provide a statement upon arrival." "Of course," Eleanor replied, "though I think we need to address compensation and consequences before we land." Bennett nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. Corporate is already aware of the situation. The social media attention has reached our headquarters." He glanced toward premium economy, where Richard was now loudly demanding to speak to someone in authority. "The Whitmores are becoming disruptive again. I'm considering whether to have airport police meet the aircraft." "I'd recommend it," Eleanor said. Mr. Whitmore physically interfered with your flight attendant. That alone justifies intervention. Before Captain Bennett could respond, Marcus Rivera approached with his tablet. Captain, I've just received communication from headquarters. They're requesting a live video conference with you and Miss Jackson when convenient. They want to address the situation directly. Bennett raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. Must be the social media pressure. It's now over 500,000 views, Marcus confirmed. The story has been picked up by several news outlets. They're calling it first-class discrimination. In the main cabin, passengers had begun openly discussing the incident across rows. A spontaneous town hall was forming as strangers united in their outrage. Multiple videos were being recorded, documenting passenger reactions and commentary. I saw the whole thing at the gate, an elderly woman in row 20 announced loudly. That agent should be fired on the spot. Did you see how they treated that poor girl? Another passenger called out. Made her sit by the bathroom like she was nothing. The collective indignation was palpable. Strangers who had been isolated in their travel bubbles were now engaged in a communal expression of support for Olivia and condemnation of the Whitmores and Diane Roberts. Richard Whitmore, hearing the growing criticism, stood up from his premium economy seat. This is ridiculous, he shouted, his voice carrying through the cabin. We're being publicly humiliated over a simple misunderstanding. I demand to speak to corporate representatives the moment we land. Patricia joined her husband, her voice equally strident. This whole situation is reverse discrimination. We're being punished because we're successful. The accusation hung in the air for a moment before passengers responded with a chorus of disbelief and derision. Reverse discrimination, someone called out. Your friend literally tore up her ticket. You stole a seat from a teenager, came another voice. The confrontation was escalating beyond individual players to a clash between fundamental values. The majority of passengers had aligned with fairness and accountability. The Whitmores represented entitlement and impunity. Captain Bennett, recognizing the potential for further disruption, made a swift decision. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, return to your seats immediately, he ordered, his captain's authority evident in every syllable. Your continued disruption of this flight will result in formal consequences upon landing. Richard began to argue, but Michael Chen and another flight attendant were already at his side. Sir, Michael said firmly, the captain has issued a direct order. Please be seated or we will be forced to restrain you for the safety of all passengers. The threat of restraint and the humiliation it would entail finally penetrated Richard's anger. He sat down, pulling Patricia with him. In first class, Olivia watched the confrontation with a mixture of vindication and discomfort. She hadn't wanted a public spectacle. She'd simply wanted the seat she'd paid for and the respect she deserved. Eleanor leaned across the aisle. You're doing very well, she said quietly. This isn't just about a seat anymore. It's about accountability. These moments matter. Olivia nodded, understanding dawning. Her individual experience had become something larger, a catalyst for a conversation about justice that now involved hundreds of people both on and off the aircraft. As the immediate confrontation subsided, passengers remained engaged with each other, sharing stories of similar experiences and discussing how systems of privilege operated in their daily lives. What had begun as a seating dispute had evolved into something more profound, a spontaneous community united in collective action against an injustice they could all clearly see. The showdown was no longer just between Olivia and the Whitmores. It had expanded to include every passenger, crew member, and now the hundreds of thousands watching online. Justice, it seemed, had found its witnesses. Revelation of evidence. As the flight continued toward New York, the evidence against the Whitmores and Diane Roberts was being methodically compiled, cross-referenced, and verified. What had begun as isolated observations was coalescing into an irrefutable case. Eleanor Vaughn sat in seat 3A, her legal pad now filled with precise notes. 32 years of federal prosecution had taught her the value of meticulous documentation. She'd recorded times, statements, and witness identifications with the thoroughness that had made her one of the Justice Department's most successful prosecutors. Her career had been defined by cases where small details created patterns of incontrovertible evidence. She'd prosecuted corporate executives whose casual emails revealed systemic discrimination, landlords whose maintenance records showed selective enforcement, and transportation companies whose scheduling policies disadvantaged certain communities. In each case, individual documents that seemed minor in isolation became devastating when assembled into a comprehensive narrative. Across the aisle, Marcus Rivera had transformed his tablet into a digital evidence locker. His quality assurance credentials gave him access to American Airlines' internal systems, allowing him to pull gate records, seat assignments, and passenger manifests. The data told a clear story. Olivia Jackson had checked in online at 5:43 a.m., confirming seat 2B. No mechanical issues had been logged for that seat. At 2:14 p.m., Diane Roberts had manually overridden the system, reassigning 2B to Richard Whitmore. The electronic trail was damning. Diane had entered inoperable for seat 2B at 2:15 p.m. 1 minute after reassigning it to Whitmore, the code required a maintenance report number, which she had fabricated using an invalid format. The system had flagged this discrepancy, but she had overridden the warning using her supervisor credentials, a serious violation of protocol that created an auditable record of deliberate falsification. In the main cabin, Jason Thompson's TikTok documentation had expanded to include witness interviews. Using his phone's camera, he'd recorded statements from passengers who had observed the gate confrontation, the boarding process, and the captain's intervention. His makeshift journalism had attracted nearly 1 million views and thousands of comments demanding accountability. "I've been flying American for 30 years, stated a business traveler in row 19, his face grave as Jason recorded. "What happened to that young lady wasn't just bad customer service. It was discrimination. Plain and simple. I watched that gate agent tear up a valid ticket because she decided a black teenager didn't belong in first class. A flight attendant named Rachel, off-duty and traveling in row 15, provided professional context. What that gate agent did violated at least 6 company policies I can think of. You can't declare a seat inoperable without maintenance verification. You can't downgrade a passenger without compensation. You absolutely cannot destroy their boarding pass. And accepting payment for seat reassignment, that's grounds for immediate termination." Flight attendant Sophia Martinez approached Olivia in seat 2B, carrying something in her hand. "Miss Jackson," she said quietly, "I found these when preparing the cabin for departure." She opened her palm to reveal the torn pieces of Olivia's original boarding pass, carefully retrieved from the trash. "I thought they might be important evidence." Olivia stared at the fragments, physical proof of the discrimination she had faced. "Thank you," she whispered, accepting the torn cardstock. Eleanor, observing the exchange, immediately recognized the significance. "May I?" she asked, extending her hand. When Olivia nodded, Eleanor examined the torn boarding pass. "This is critical evidence," she explained. "Destruction of a boarding pass is destruction of a federally issued document. It's not just bad at customer service, it's potentially criminal." The boarding pass fragments revealed more than just Olivia's seat assignment. They showed her check-in time, confirmation number, and fare class, all validating her legitimate purchase. The clean tear line provided physical evidence of deliberate destruction rather than accidental damage. Captain Bennett emerged from the cockpit again, this time with a printout in hand. He approached Marcus Rivera first, conferring quietly before moving to Eleanor's seat. "We've accessed the security camera footage from the gate area," he informed her, his voice low enough that only Eleanor and Olivia could hear. "It clearly shows the entire incident, including what appears to be a cash transfer from Mrs. Whitmore to Diane Roberts." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "That upgrades this from discrimination to bribery." "Exactly," Bennett confirmed. "Corporate is taking this very seriously. They've authorized me to offer Miss Jackson immediate compensation and are prepared to meet with her upon arrival. They've also suspended Diane Roberts' pending investigation." In premium economy, Richard Whitmore was engaged in a tense phone conversation, having paid for in-flight Wi-Fi access. "I don't care what the social media looks like," he hissed into his phone, unaware that passengers around him were listening intently. "This needs to be contained before we land. Call Davis and get him to contact American's chief counsel. We need this handled." Patricia leaned close to her husband. "What are they saying?" Her voice, though intended to be private, carried to nearby rows. "It's worse than we thought," Richard muttered. "The video's everywhere. Davis says our biggest client is already asking questions. 2 rows behind them, a passenger typed rapidly on her phone, updating a Reddit thread about the incident with this new information. In first class, Marcus approached Olivia with his tablet. Miss Jackson, with your permission, I'd like to document your original boarding pass fragments. They'll be included in my official report. Olivia nodded, carefully arranging the torn pieces on her tray table. Marcus photographed them from multiple angles, ensuring the seat assignment and Olivia's name were clearly visible in relation to the tear. Thank you, he said. I should also inform you that American Airlines customer advocacy team is preparing a formal response. They've authorized me to assure you that all expenses related to your trip will be covered, including hotel and transportation in New York. Eleanor, who had been taking notes throughout this exchange, looked up sharply. That's insufficient, she stated. This incident goes beyond inconvenience. It involves discrimination, fraud, and destruction of federal documents. The appropriate response includes financial compensation for emotional distress, a formal apology, and assurance of disciplinary action against the responsible parties. Marcus didn't disagree. Corporate is prepared to discuss comprehensive remedies upon arrival. They understand the severity. Meanwhile, lead flight attendant Michael Chen was documenting the Whitmore's ongoing behavior. Richard had progressed from angry demands to thinly veiled threats against the crew, while Patricia continued making loudly disparaging remarks about political correctness and cancel culture. Michael recorded each comment with timestamp and context, building a case for potential prosecution under air safety regulations. In the cockpit, First Officer Jessica Rodriguez was communicating with LaGuardia operations, ensuring that representatives from American Airlines corporate security, customer relations, and legal departments would be waiting at the gate. She had also requested airport police presence based on the Whitmore's escalating behavior. Throughout the aircraft, passengers were compiling their own documentation. Dozens of phones had captured the confrontations, the captain's intervention, and the Whitmore's reactions. Email addresses and phone numbers were being exchanged as witnesses coordinated their accounts. A Wall Street compliance officer in row 22 offered his professional assessment to those seated nearby. What we're witnessing is a textbook case of fraud and discrimination. The evidence chain is remarkably complete. System logs, physical documents, video recordings, multiple witness statements. From a compliance perspective, it's an ironclad case. The collective evidence was overwhelming. What might have been dismissed as one passenger's word against the airlines was now supported by video recordings, internal documents, physical evidence, and dozens of witness statements. The case against Diane Roberts and the Whitmores was no longer circumstantial. It was comprehensive and irrefutable. As the evidence mounted, so did the implications. This was no longer just about a seat reassignment. It had become a documented case study in discrimination, privilege, and accountability. Every element of the incident had been captured, corroborated, and cataloged. The truth was established beyond reasonable doubt, and now justice awaited its moment. The aircraft began its initial descent toward New York. The revelation of evidence complete, but its consequences still unfolding. For Olivia Jackson, sitting in seat 2B, with her debate materials spread before her, the evidence represented something profound validation. Her experience had been real. Her treatment had been wrong. And now everyone knew it. The ultimatum 200 miles from LaGuardia. Flight 1108 entered a holding pattern due to congestion in the New York airspace. The delay created a pressure cooker atmosphere inside the aircraft. With landing postponed, tensions that might have dissipated with arrival instead continued to build. Captain Bennett used the opportunity to address the situation decisively. After conferring with American Airlines Chief Operations Officer via satellite phone, he made his way to premium economy where the Whitmores continued their campaign of complaints and threats. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, he began, his tone formal and authoritative. I need to speak with you about the remainder of our flight and what will happen upon arrival. Richard looked up from his phone, irritation evident. Finally, I've been trying to get someone in authority to address this outrageous situation. That's precisely what I'm doing, Bennett replied, his posture, feet planted shoulder-width apart. Hands clasped behind his back projected the unmistakable command presence of a senior captain. Based on your behavior throughout this flight, including attempted intimidation of crew members, disruption of cabin operations, and threatening statements. I have made the following decisions as captain of this aircraft. The surrounding passengers fell silent, many recording discreetly on their phones. The Whitmore's expressions shifted from irritation to wariness. First, Bennett continued, upon arrival, you will remain seated until all other passengers have deplaned. You will then be escorted from the aircraft by airport police and airline security. That's absurd, Patricia interjected. You can't. Bennett raised a hand, silencing her. Second, American Airlines has revoked your boarding passes for your connecting flight to London. Your checked baggage will be held pending investigation into potential federal violations related to today's incidents. Richard's face flushed dark red. You have absolutely no authority to— I have complete authority under federal aviation regulations, Bennett stated flatly. As captain, my decisions regarding safety and security are final. Now you have a choice to make. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to ensure only the Whitmores and immediate witnesses could hear. You can accept these terms and remain in your current seats quietly for the remainder of our flight, or you can continue your disruptive behavior, in which case I am prepared to divert this aircraft to Philadelphia, where federal air marshals will remove you. That option would include immediate placement on the no-fly list pending federal investigation. The ultimatum hung in the air. Around them, boss, passengers watched with undisguised interest. Several had moved their phones to better capture the confrontation. This is because of that girl, Patricia hissed, her voice vibrating with indignation. You're all falling over yourselves because she's— Choose your next words very carefully. Mrs. Whitmore, Eleanor Vaughn interrupted, having approached during the captain's address. I'm documenting every statement for potential inclusion in hate crime charges. Richard grabbed his wife's arm, silencing her. His legal training had finally broken through his outrage, and he recognized the precipice they were approaching. We understand, Gettin, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. We'll cooperate fully. Excellent choice, Bennett replied. To be clear, any further disruption will result in immediate diversion and federal charges. Is that understood? The Whitmores nodded stiffly, their capitulation visible to all nearby passengers. A quiet murmur of approval spread through the cabin. As Captain Bennett returned to the cockpit, Eleanor remained near the Whitmores, a silent reminder of the legal consequences awaiting them. Marcus Rivera had positioned himself at the forward bulkhead of the main cabin, documenting the exchange for his official report. In first class, Olivia had watched the confrontation through the cabin divider. The public dressing down of the Whitmores provided a measure of vindication, but it also reminded her of the inequities that had brought them to this point. A white couple had felt entitled to take what was hers, and only through extraordinary circumstances had justice prevailed. Sophia approached with fresh orange juice. Are you okay? She asked softly. That was intense. I'm fine, Olivia replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the drink. I just want to get to New York and focus on my debate. You will, Sophia assured her. And after what happened today, I think you'll have plenty of new material. The comment drew a small smile from Olivia. Her debate topic, systemic barriers in modern contracts, had just received a vivid real-world illustration. Throughout the main cabin, passengers were discussing the captain's ultimatum in hushed voices. The collective sentiment was clear justice was being served. What had begun as one teenager's humiliation had evolved into a public reckoning with entitlement and discrimination. Jason Thompson's latest TikTok update captured this mood perfectly. Captain just laid down the law. The couple who stole the seat are getting airport police escorts off the plane. Justice is coming for first-class thieves. Hashtag justice for Olivia now at 1.3 million views. The Whitmores sat in rigid silence, their defeat evident in their postures. Their phones buzzed continuously with notifications, suggesting the outside world was already responding to their actions. Richard's law firm colleagues had begun distancing themselves through carefully worded texts. Patricia's social circle was fragmenting in real time, society friends suddenly unavailable for their planned London dinner parties. As the aircraft finally received clearance to begin its approach to LaGuardia, the ultimatum had achieved its purpose. Order was restored. Accountability was assured. The power dynamic had been permanently reversed. For the first time in hours, Flight 1108 proceeded in relative calm, but beneath that calm, anticipation built. Everyone aboard knew this story wasn't over. The true reckoning awaited on the ground, where the isolated ecosystem of the aircraft would open to the wider world of consequences, both professional and public. The plane began its descent toward New York, carrying not just passengers, but a case study in justice that was already reverberating far beyond its pressurized cabin. The standoff. The announcement came as Flight 108 began its final approach to LaGuardia. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Bennett. We'll be landing in approximately 15 minutes. Upon arrival, we have a special procedure to follow. All passengers except those in row 12 will deplane normally. If row 12 is your assigned seat, please remain seated until advised otherwise. Thank you for your cooperation. The message was professional and neutral, but its meaning was clear to everyone aboard. Row 12, where the Whitmores had been relocated, would be handled separately. The public nature of the announcement served as both operational instruction and final judgment. In premium economy, the Whitmores sat in stony silence. Richard's earlier attempts to contact airline executives and law firm partners had yielded minimal results. His most recent calls had gone straight to voicemail. Patricia had abandoned her phone entirely, staring straight ahead with rigid posture that failed to mask her humiliation. Behind them, passengers exchanged knowing glances. Several had already arranged to linger in the terminal to witness the Whitmore's police escort. Others were coordinating social media updates to ensure the story's conclusion would be properly documented. In first class, Olivia reviewed her debate materials with renewed focus. The incident that had nearly derailed her trip had instead provided her with powerful first-hand evidence of how systems could be manipulated to disadvantage minorities. Eleanor had helped her organize her thoughts, suggesting ways to incorporate the experience into her arguments without appearing self-serving. Remember, Eleanor advised, this isn't about you personally. It's about the pattern your experience represents. Focus on the systemic issues, how the gate agent felt empowered to violate policy, how threats were used to enforce compliance, how documentation became your protection. Olivia nodded, making notes in the margins of her prepared speech. The academic concepts she had researched for months had suddenly gained vivid real-world application. As the aircraft descended through 10,000 feet, the cabin crew began final preparations for landing. Michael Chen made one last pass through the main cabin, noting that the Whitmores remained compliant, if visibly seething. In the cockpit, Captain Bennett confirmed with LaGuardia operations that their welcoming committee was assembled. American Airlines executives, airport police, and customer service representatives were positioned at the gate. The wheels touched down at 5:43 p.m. Eastern Time, a smooth landing that barely registered with the passengers. Their attention was focused on the impending conclusion to the drama that had consumed their flight. As the aircraft taxied toward Terminal B, phones reappeared despite the standing prohibition against electronic devices. No one wanted to miss the finale. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York's LaGuardia Airport, Sophia announced once they reached the gate. Local time is 5:51 p.m. Weather is clear, 68 degrees. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened until the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. The familiar routine of arrival continued, seatbelt signs extinguished, passengers reaching for overhead bins, the rustle of coats and bags being gathered. But there was nothing routine about the atmosphere. The usual post-landing impatience was replaced with collective anticipation. As passengers began to deplane, Eleanor approached Olivia. I'd recommend waiting until most passengers have exited, she advised. There's likely to be media in the terminal, and you should be prepared. Media, Olivia repeated, alarmed. Why would they care about a seat reassignment? This stopped being about a seat hours ago, Eleanor explained gently. It's now about justice, accountability, and a young black woman standing up to discrimination. That resonates with people. Marcus Rivera joined them, his tablet displaying a news website. The story has been picked up by major outlets, he confirmed. Social media engagement is in the millions. American Airlines CEO has issued a preliminary statement condemning discrimination and promising a full investigation. Olivia stared at them, the magnitude of the situation finally registering. What had begun as her personal humiliation had transformed into a national conversation. In the main cabin, most passengers had deplaned. Those remaining moved deliberately slowly, creating a crowd near the front of the aircraft. They were waiting for the confrontation they sensed was imminent. 4 airport police officers boarded the aircraft, followed by a woman in an American Airlines executive uniform. Captain Bennett emerged from the cockpit to meet them. "Officers," he greeted them formally. "Thank you for your assistance. We have 2 passengers in row 12 who need to be escorted from the aircraft for questioning regarding multiple violations of airline policy and federal transportation regulations." The executive stepped forward. "I'm Maria Gonzalez, Vice President of Customer Experience. I'll be handling this matter personally." Bennett nodded, leading the group to row 12, where the Whitmores sat in isolation. The remaining passengers watched with undisguised interest, phones recording discreetly. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," Bennett addressed them. "As discussed, you'll be deplaning under escort. These officers will accompany you to a private area where you'll be interviewed regarding today's incidents." Richard finally abandoned his pretense of cooperation. "This is absolutely outrageous," he snarled, rising to his feet. "I am a senior partner at Whitmore, Davis, in Blackwell. I've been a platinum member with this airline for 15 years. You cannot treat us like criminals." "Sir," the lead officer responded calmly, "please gather your belongings and come with us." "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Patricia joined in, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "My husband plays golf with your CEO. We donate to the Police Benevolence Association. This is reverse discrimination, plain and simple." The accusation hung in the air for a moment before a spontaneous reaction rippled through the remaining passengers. It began as murmurs of disbelief, then evolved into something more coordinated. "Shame," someone called out. Then another voice joined. "Shame," and another. "Shame." The chant built, passengers calling in unison, "Shame, shame, shame." The public rebuke, reminiscent of medieval punishment rituals, struck the Whitmores with visible force. Patricia's face crumpled. Richard's bluster evaporated. In that moment, they finally understood they had lost. Not just the seats, not just the argument, but their social standing, their professional reputation, their carefully constructed facade of respectability. All of it, sacrificed for a first-class seat that wasn't theirs to take. "Officers," Richard said quietly, reaching for his briefcase. "We'll cooperate." The standoff ended not with further confrontation, but with defeated compliance. The Whitmores were escorted from the aircraft, passing through the gauntlet of recording phones and the disapproving faces. The chant followed them down the jet bridge, "Shame, shame, shame." In first class, Olivia remained seated, allowing the spectacle to unfold without her presence. This wasn't her victory to celebrate. It was justice taking its course, systems of accountability functioning as they should. Eleanor touched her shoulder gently. "It's time to go. There are people waiting to speak with you." Olivia nodded, gathering her belongings. As she moved toward the exit, the remaining passengers broke into spontaneous applause. Faces that had been indifferent during boarding now beamed with support and approval. "Thank you," Olivia said simply. Overwhelmed by the collective validation, she stepped from the aircraft into a terminal buzzing with activity. Camera flashes greeted her. Journalists called questions. American Airlines representatives stood ready to escort her to a private lounge. The standoff was over. The resolution was beginning, and Olivia Jackson, who had simply wanted to fly to a debate competition, found herself at the center of a moment much larger than herself, the resolution on the plane. The final moments aboard Flight 1108 unfolded with the choreographed precision of justice long overdue. As the Whitmores disappeared down the jet bridge, escorted by airport police, a palpable release of tension swept through the remaining passengers. What had begun as an isolated incident of discrimination had evolved into a community's unified stand against entitlement and prejudice. Captain Bennett returned to the first-class cabin where Olivia still sat, gathering her debate materials. The applause had subsided, but the atmosphere of solidarity remained, hanging in the air like invisible validation. "Miss Jackson," Bennett said, offering his business card, "I want to personally apologize again for what you experienced today. It should never have happened, and I'm sorry it took so long to correct." Olivia accepted the card with a composed nod. "Thank you for believing me, for making it right." "Not just right, Eleanor interjected from the adjacent seat. There's a difference," Bennett agreed. "Miss Gonzalez is waiting to speak with you in our flagship lounge. She'll address compensation and ensure your accommodations in New York are taken care of. And if you're willing, our corporate communications team would like to discuss how we handle the media interest. Media interest, Olivia repeated, still processing the scale of what had transpired. Her debate competition, which had seemed so monumentally important that morning, now shared mental space with unexpected public attention. You don't have to speak to any reporters if you don't want to, Eleanor assured her, but your story has clearly resonated with people. Sometimes these moments become opportunities to create broader change. Marcus Rivera approached, tablet in hand. Miss Jackson, I've forwarded all documentation to our executive team. They've authorized me to inform you that Diane Roberts has been suspended pending termination proceedings. Additionally, a comprehensive review of gate procedures is being implemented across all American Airlines hubs. The systematic response represented something Olivia hadn't dared hope for: institutional accountability. Not just an individual correction, but structural change. As the last passengers deplaned, Jason Thompson lingered in the forward cabin, his phone finally lowered. Olivia, he called. I just wanted to say I'm sorry this happened to you, but I'm glad I could help document it. Your story's already making a difference. My TikTok has over 2 million views, and people are sharing their own experiences with discrimination in transportation. 2 million. Olivia's eyes widened. The number seemed abstract, disconnected from her reality. I've turned off comments to protect your privacy, Jason added, but people are really engaged. Airlines, customer service, racial profiling. It's starting important conversations. Sophia Martinez approached with Olivia's carry-on, which she'd stored safely during the confrontation. Your bag, Miss Jackson, and this, she handed over a handwritten note, is from our crew. We wanted you to know how sorry we are for your experience and how much we admire your dignity throughout. Olivia accepted the note, momentarily speechless at the gesture. She had entered the aircraft feeling powerless and isolated. Now she stood surrounded by allies and advocates. Eleanor gathered her belongings, her legal pad filled with meticulous notes. Are you ready? There's quite a reception waiting. Olivia took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders with the same determination that had carried her to the National Debate Championships. Yes, I'm ready. As they moved toward the exit, Michael Chen stopped them with a gentle touch. Miss Jackson, I thought you should know. Several first-class passengers left these for you. He handed her a stack of business cards. Attorneys, executives, professors. They were impressed by your composure and wanted to offer mentorship or internship opportunities. The unexpected networking opportunity, a silver lining to the day's discrimination, brought tears to Olivia's eyes for the first time since Diane had torn her boarding pass. Not tears of humiliation or anger, but of recognition. Her worth, so casually dismissed at the gate, was being affirmed tenfold. Captain Bennett led the way off the aircraft, Olivia following with Eleanor and Marcus flanking her like unofficial counsel. The jet bridge, normally a forgettable transition space, felt symbolic, a passage from injustice to vindication. In the gate area, a small crowd had gathered. Passengers from the flight lingered, many offering encouraging nods or thumbs-up gestures as Olivia emerged. American Airlines representatives stood ready with tablet computers and reassuring smiles. Beyond them, airport police were still visible, escorting the Whitmores toward a private security office. Maria Gonzalez stepped forward, extending her hand. Miss Jackson, I'm Maria Gonzalez, VP of Customer Experience. On behalf of American Airlines, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. What happened was inexcusable and completely contrary to our values and policies. Olivia shook her hand firmly. Thank you. I appreciate that. We've arranged for a private car to take you to your hotel. Maria continued. All your expenses in New York will be covered, including accommodations at the Marriott Marquis where your debate competition is being held. Additionally, we'd like to offer you compensation for today's ordeal and upgrade you to first class for all future travel with American Airlines. The swift, comprehensive response spoke to both corporate damage control and genuine remorse. Olivia glanced at Eleanor, who gave a subtle nod of approval. Thank you, Olivia replied, but I'd also like to know what systemic changes will be made to prevent this from happening to other passengers. Maria's expression shifted from polite contrition to genuine respect. That's an excellent question. If you're willing, we'd like to invite you to participate in our Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council. Your perspective would be invaluable as we revise our training and enforcement procedures. The invitation represented something beyond individual remedy, a seat at the table where policy was shaped. Before Olivia could respond, a commotion near the security office caught everyone's attention. Richard Whitmore's voice carried across the terminal. "This is a setup. We're being scapegoated for systemic failures. We'll sue everyone involved." His outburst, rather than intimidating those present, only reinforced the justice of the outcome. Several passengers shook their heads in disgust. Airport police tightened their formation around the Whitmores, escorting them more firmly toward private rooms. "I think," Olivia said, turning back to Maria, "I would be very interested in helping improve your procedures. This shouldn't happen to anyone else." As the group moved toward the flagship lounge, Olivia noticed Jason updating his TikTok one last time. His whispered narration carried just far enough for her to hear the airline VP just personally apologized and is taking her to VIP lounge. Corporate accountability happening in real time. Justice for Olivia isn't just a hashtag anymore. It's actually happening. The resolution aboard Flight 1108 had reached its conclusion. What had begun with a torn boarding pass had ended with torn-down barriers. A 17-year-old debate champion from Chicago's South Side had boarded an aircraft seeking simply to retain her rightful seat. She was deplaning as an unwitting catalyst for institutional change. Eleanor summed it up perfectly as they entered the private lounge. Sometimes justice requires the right case at the right time, with the right witnesses. Today, you had all three. Parrot wheat for immediate aftermath. The flagship lounge at LaGuardia Terminal B existed in a different reality from the crowded concourses outside its frosted glass doors. Here, ambient lighting softened the edges of premium furnishings. The hum of airport operations faded beneath acoustic design and carefully curated music. Attentive staff moved with practiced discretion, maintaining the illusion that air travel could be a civilized, even luxurious experience. Olivia Jackson sat on a leather sofa, her debate material spread beside her, a fresh orange juice on the table. After the public drama of Flight 1108, the private space offered welcome respite. Eleanor Vaughn occupied an adjacent armchair, reviewing notes on her phone while maintaining a protective presence. Marcus Rivera had excused himself to file his official report, promising to return for any additional questions. Maria Gonzalez returned from a series of phone calls, tablet in hand. "Miss Jackson," she began, taking a seat across from Olivia. "I've just spoken with our CEO. He wants to personally apologize for your experience and has authorized comprehensive remediation." "That's very kind," Olivia replied, maintaining the composed dignity that had impressed so many aboard the flight. "But I'm most concerned about what happens next, not just for me, but for your policies." Maria nodded, genuine respect evident in her expression. "We're implementing immediate changes. Diane Roberts has been terminated, effective immediately. All gate agents will receive mandatory retraining on non-discrimination policies, and we're revising our seat assignment protocols to prevent manual overrides without supervisor approval." These systematic responses represented something beyond individual remedy, actual structural change. "Additionally," Maria continued, "we'd like to offer you the following full refund of your original ticket, first-class round trip to Chicago when your competition concludes, platinum status with American Airlines for 1 year, and a $5,000 travel voucher for future flights." Eleanor made a small noise that suggested the offer was reasonable but not exceptional. "We're also covering all your expenses in New York," Maria added quickly. "Hotel, transportation, meals, everything, and our media relations team is prepared to assist with any press inquiries. Though you're under no obligation to speak publicly." Olivia considered the offer, mentally calculating its value against the humiliation she had endured. The compensation was generous by most standards, particularly for a high school student from Chicago's South Side. But something in her hesitated. "What about the Whitmores?" she asked. "What happens to them?" Maria's expression tightened slightly. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore have been banned from American Airlines for life. Their A-Advantage accounts have been terminated, and all accumulated miles forfeited. We're also cooperating fully with airport police regarding potential charges of fraud, bribery, and interference with flight crew." The comprehensive consequences satisfied something in Olivia. Not a desire for revenge, but a need for proportional accountability. "I accept your offer," she said finally, "and I'd like to help with your policy reviews if that's still an option." "Absolutely, Bone," Maria confirmed. "Your perspective would be invaluable." As they discussed logistics, Captain Bennett entered the lounge. He had changed from his uniform into business casual attire, but retained the unmistakable bearing of command. "Miss Jackson," he said, approaching their seating area, "I wanted to check on you before heading to my hotel. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Olivia replied, genuine appreciation warming her voice. "Thank you for everything you did up there." Bennett shook his head slightly. "I only wish we'd identified the situation sooner. You should never have been displaced in the first place. But when it mattered, you believed me." Olivia pointed out. "That made all the difference." The captain nodded, understanding the deeper truth in her statement. In a world where power dynamics often silenced voices like hers, being believed represented a fundamental justice. "The crew wanted you to have this," he said, presenting a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "It's a tradition for memorable flights." Olivia unwrapped the gift to find a model of an American Airlines aircraft with Flight 1108, Justice at 30,000 feet, inscribed on the base. The gesture, symbolizing her experience had mattered enough to be commemorated, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, words inadequate for the validation the gift represented. As Captain Bennett departed, Eleanor leaned closer. "They're genuinely trying to make this right," she observed. "That's more than many corporations do." "I know," Olivia agreed. "It's just—" She hesitated, organizing her thoughts. "This shouldn't have happened in the first place, and it wouldn't have been resolved without you. Marcus, Jason, and everyone else who spoke up. What happens to people who don't have an entire plane full of witnesses and advocates?" The question hung in the air, highlighting the systemic nature of the problem beyond her individual experience. Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Olivia's phone, a text from her grandmother. "Baby girl, you're trending. Call me right now." Reality rushed back. While Olivia had been processing events inside the flagship lounge, the outside world had been consuming the story through social media. Jason's TikTok had exploded beyond its initial audience, picked up by news outlets and commentators across platforms. "I should call my grandmother," Olivia said, suddenly remembering her family would be worried. "Of course," Maria agreed. "We have private rooms if you'd like some privacy." In a small conference room with Manhattan's skyline views, Olivia FaceTimed her grandmother. Elaine Jackson's concerned face filled the screen, her salon still visible in the background. "Olivia Marie Jackson," Elaine exclaimed. "Are you all right? Everyone at the salon is watching this video of you on an airplane. What happened?" Olivia recounted the day's events, her grandmother's expression shifting from concern to outrage to fierce pride. "They tried to put you into the back of the plane." Elaine's voice rose with indignation. "After we scraped together for that first-class ticket, oh, hell no." "It's okay, Grandma," Olivia assured her. "It got fixed. More than fixed. The airline is covering everything now, and the people who did it are in serious trouble." Elaine studied her granddaughter's face through the screen. "You handled yourself with dignity, didn't you, just like I taught you?" "Yes, ma'am." "That's my girl." Elaine's pride radiated through the digital connection. "Now tell me about this debate competition. You still ready to show them how it's done?" The conversation grounded Olivia, reconnecting her to her original purpose. The discrimination had been real, the resolution significant, but her reason for being in New York remained unchanged. She had a debate to win. When she returned to the main lounge, a car service had been arranged to take her to the Marriott Marquise. Eleanor had agreed to accompany her, providing continued guidance through the unexpected attention. As they prepared to leave, Sophia Martinez and Michael Chen arrived, having completed their post-flight duties. "We wanted to check on you before you left," Sophia explained. "And to thank you, actually." "Thank me?" Olivia asked. "Surprised?" Michael nodded. "What happened today will change things for the better. Flight crews see discrimination sometimes, but don't always have the support to address it. Your case is creating a precedent." The realization that her individual experience might improve conditions for others added meaning to the ordeal. This wasn't just about one seat on one flight. It was about systems of accountability and respect that affected thousands. They exited the flagship lounge into the main terminal, where Maria had arranged for security to escort them past the gathering media. As they moved through the concourse, Olivia noticed travelers watching her, some recognizing her from the viral videos. A few offered thumbs-up gestures or encouraging nods. The black sedan waited curbside, driver holding the door as Olivia and Eleanor settled into the leather back seat. As they pulled away from the terminal, Eleanor gestured to Olivia's phone. "You might want to turn that off for a while," she suggested. "Give yourself some space to process before the debate tomorrow." Olivia nodded, powering down the device as the Manhattan skyline emerged through the windshield. The day that had begun with discrimination had transformed into something unexpected, a public reckoning with entitlement and accountability. And somehow, improbably, a 17-year-old debate champion from Chicago's South Side had found herself at its center. As the car merged onto the highway, Olivia opened her debate folder. The experience aboard Flight 1108 had given her powerful new material on systemic barriers in modern contracts. Tomorrow, she would channel today's injustice into tomorrow's argument. After all, she had a championship to win. And now, more than ever, she understood exactly what was at stake. Landing in New York, the drive from LaGuardia to Times Square offered Olivia a welcome transition. 20 minutes to decompress as Queens gave way to Manhattan's vertical geometry. Eleanor used the time to brief her on what to expect at the hotel. "American Airlines has coordinated with the debate organizers," she explained. "They'll have someone waiting at the VIP entrance to bypass the main lobby. It's likely there will be some media interest, but hotel security will maintain your privacy." Olivia nodded, still processing the day's rapid evolution from personal humiliation to public interest story. "I still don't understand why people care so much about an airline seat." Eleanor considered this with the careful precision of a former prosecutor. "It's not about the seat," she said finally. "It's about what the seat represents. Your story contains elements that resonate universally: injustice, discrimination, accountability, vindication. And you handled it with remarkable dignity for someone your age." The sedan turned onto 46th Street, where the Marriott Marquis dominated the block with its distinctive curved facade. As promised, a hotel manager waited at the service entrance, quickly ushering them through staff quarters to a private elevator. "Miss Jackson," the manager said as they ascended, "we've upgraded you to a Times Square view suite on the executive floor. Your debate team coordinator has been notified of your arrival, and your registration materials have been delivered to your room." The efficient arrangements, evidence of corporate damage control in action, created a surreal contrast to the conflict aboard Flight 1108. Hours earlier, Olivia had been fighting for the seat she'd paid for. Now, Manhattan's hospitality infrastructure was reorganizing itself around her comfort. The suite exceeded anything Olivia had imagined. Corner windows showcasing Times Square's electric glow, separate living area with dedicated workspace, bathroom larger than her bedroom at home. She set her a carry-on beside the king-size bed, momentarily overwhelmed by the rapid pendulum swing from discrimination to deference. "This is a lot," she admitted to Eleanor, who had accompanied her to ensure the arrangements met expectations. "American Airlines is being appropriately responsive," Eleanor replied, professional assessment evident in her tone. "Though I suspect this level of accommodation is also intended to minimize potential legal action." Before Olivia could respond, her phone, powered on upon arrival, chimed with an incoming call. The screen displayed Coach Williams, her debate team supervisor. "I should take this," she said, anxiety edging her voice. After the day's drama, she'd almost forgotten the competition that had brought her to New York in the first place. Eleanor nodded, moving toward the door. "I'll let you get settled. I've left my contact information on the desk if you need anything. And Olivia?" She paused, her formal demeanor softening slightly. "You handled today with remarkable poise. That will serve you well tomorrow." Alone in the suite, Olivia answered her coach's call, bracing for questions about the viral incident. "Olivia," Coach Williams' voice burst through the speaker, concern evident. "Are you all right? We've been seeing these videos online. Something about your airline seat." "I'm fine," Olivia assured her, summarizing the day's events with the succinct clarity that made her a championship debater. It got resolved, and I'm at the hotel now. I'm still ready for tomorrow. Of course you are, Williams said, pride evident in her voice. After handling discrimination at 30,000 feet, the national championship should be a breeze. The team's been watching everything unfold online. They're in awe of how you handled it. The conversation shifted to competition logistics, her preliminary round assignment, judging panel composition, last-minute research updates. The familiar details anchored Olivia, reconnecting her to the purpose that had brought her to New York. After finalizing arrangements to meet her teammates for breakfast, Olivia ended the call and finally allowed herself a moment to fully absorb the day's events. She moved to the window, watching Times Square pulse below, thousands of people flowing through Manhattan's commercial heart, each carrying their own stories of triumph and challenge. Her reflection stared back from the glass, superimposed over the cityscape, a 17-year-old in a carefully tailored thrift store blazer who had stood her ground when systems of power aligned against her. The girl Grandma Elaine had raised to fly up front and show them how it's done. A knock at the door interrupted her reflection. Through the peephole, she saw a hotel staff member with a rolling cart. Opening the door revealed a room service delivery she hadn't ordered, a selection of sandwiches, fresh fruit, and a pot of herbal tea, along with a handwritten note from Maria Gonzalez. Thought you might prefer dining in tonight. Your breakfast will be delivered at 7 a.m. Wishing you success in your competition tomorrow. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, anticipating her need for privacy and preparation time, struck Olivia more deeply than the luxury suite. It acknowledged her as a competitor with important work ahead, not just a viral sensation to be managed. As she settled at the desk with her debate materials and a cup of chamomile tea, her phone began buzzing with notifications. Text messages from classmates who had seen the videos. Social media tags from strangers offering support. News alerts from major outlets covering the story. One notification stood out. A message from Jason Thompson. Hope you are doing okay. Just wanted you to know that TikTok has 3.8 M views now. Comments are 100% supportive. People are really inspired by how you handled everything. Good luck with your debate. The scale of public interest remained difficult to comprehend. Olivia opened Twitter briefly, where hashtag Justice for Olivia was trending nationally. News sites had picked up the story with headlines like Black Teens First-Class Seat Stolen, Entire Plane Revolts, and Discrimination at 30,000 Feet, How One Flight Became a Lesson in Accountability. The coverage felt simultaneously validating and intrusive. Her personal humiliation transformed into public discourse without her consent. Yet the prevailing narrative had shade aligned with justice, with systems working as they should, with dignity prevailing over discrimination. She closed the social media apps, focusing instead on her debate preparations. Tomorrow's preliminary rounds would determine seeding for the elimination brackets. Her topic, systemic barriers in modern contracts, had gained powerful new dimensions through lived experience. As she refined her arguments, incorporating elements from Flight 1108 without making the presentation self-referential, Olivia found herself drawing unexpected connections. The gate agent's power to override systems, the presumption that she didn't belong, the casual efficiency with which her rights had been dismissed. These weren't abstract concepts from academic research anymore. They were mechanisms she had witnessed firsthand, the machinery of exclusion operating in real time. When exhaustion finally overtook her around midnight, Olivia fell asleep with her notes still spread across the king-sized bed, the lights of Times Square painting kaleidoscope patterns across the ceiling. Tomorrow she would face judges who knew nothing of today's events. She would stand on the strength of her arguments alone. And for the first time since Diane Roberts had torn her boarding pass, Olivia Jackson slept without dreams of humiliation or vindication. Only the peaceful rest of someone who had stood her ground and prevailed. Airline response at 7:15 the following morning. While Olivia prepared for her debate preliminary rounds, American Airlines CEO David Mitchell stood before a hastily assembled press conference at the company's Fort Worth headquarters. Executives in crisp suits formed a somber backdrop as Mitchell addressed the cameras with practiced contrition. Yesterday on American Airlines Flight 1108 from Dallas to New York, we failed to live up to our fundamental promise to treat all customers with dignity and respect. He began, his expression appropriately grave. A 17-year-old passenger experienced discrimination that contradicts our core values and violates our explicit policies. For this, I offer our deepest and most sincere apology. The statement, crafted by crisis management experts overnight, continued with specific action points: termination of the gate agent involved, comprehensive policy reviews, mandatory retraining for all customer-facing staff, and examination of potential systemic issues in gate procedures. Additionally, Mitchell concluded, we have reached out to the passenger directly to offer appropriate remediation and to listen to her perspective on how we can improve. We are grateful for her willingness to help us learn from this unacceptable failure. While the press conference represented more than standard damage control, the rapid, comprehensive response acknowledged the undeniable evidence created by social media documentation. When Jason Thompson's TikTok surpassed 4 million views overnight and #Justice for Olivia trended nationally, traditional corporate playbooks of denial and minimization became untenable. Behind the scenes, Americans' decision-making had been shaped by Marcus Rivera's detailed incident report. Unlike typical customer complaints that could be deflected or minimized, Flight 1108 had produced overwhelming documentation from multiple perspectives: passenger videos, crew statements, and the quality assurance representative's contemporaneous notes. Most damning was the security camera footage from the gate, which clearly showed Diane Roberts accepting what appeared to be cash from Patricia Whitmore immediately before reassigning Olivia's seat. Miles away in Dallas, Diane Roberts received official termination papers via courier. 22 years of employment ended with a certified letter detailing her violations: discriminatory practices, falsification of technical reports, destruction of federal documents, and accepting unauthorized gratuities. Her employee badge, deactivated remotely the previous evening, would never again open American Airlines doors. In her modest apartment, Diane sat at her kitchen table staring at the termination letter. The consequences of her actions were still unfolding. Beyond losing her job and benefits, she faced potential federal charges for destruction of a boarding pass, a federal document, and accepting bribes to manipulate seating. Her retirement plans, once just years away, had evaporated overnight. The financial security she had spent 2 decades building collapsed because of one discriminatory decision captured on video. In New York, Richard and Patricia Whitmore faced their own consequences. After 3 hours of questioning by airport police and airline security, they had been released without immediate charges but informed that investigations were ongoing. Their checked luggage, 6 designer suitcases containing wardrobes for their London business trip, had been rerouted back to Dallas through a logistical error that would take several days to rectify. More devastating than the inconvenience was the professional fallout. Richard had awakened to 17 missed calls from his law firm's managing partners and an email requesting his immediate return to Dallas for an emergency meeting regarding ethical concerns arising from widely publicized events. Patricia's social calendar imploded as London hostesses sent regretful cancellations of dinner party invitations. The charity foundation, where she served as a board member, had called an emergency session to discuss her continued involvement. In the American Airlines operational headquarters, Marcus Rivera delivered his comprehensive incident report in person to the chief operating officer. The 27-page document, supported by video evidence, passenger statements, and system logs, provided irrefutable documentation of what had transpired. Its executive summary contained recommendations that would reshape gate procedures across the entire airline. Implementation of a dual verification system for any seat reassignments, prohibition of manual overrides without supervisor approval, mandatory documentation of all downgrade justifications, special protections for minors traveling alone, real-time notification to quality assurance when first-class seats are reassigned after check-in. The report's conclusion was unequivocal. This incident represents a catastrophic failure of our customer service principles, discrimination policies, and operational integrity. The financial, reputational, and ethical costs demand immediate, systemic correction. By mid-morning, American Airlines had established a dedicated response team to manage both the public relations aspects and the operational changes needed. The incident had evolved from an individual customer service failure to a corporate inflection point, forcing examination of how implicit bias operated within seemingly neutral systems. Inside American's social media command center, specialists monitored the online conversations surrounding Flight 1108. Sentiment analysis showed 89% negative reaction toward the airline initially, shifting toward cautiously positive as the company's comprehensive response became public. The hashtag Justice for Olivia had expanded to include hashtag Hold Them Accountable and hashtag First Class, while Black, connecting Olivia's experience to broader patterns of discrimination in transportation. Racial justice organizations issued statements about the incident, contextualizing it within historical patterns of exclusion in public accommodations. At 11:30 a.m., as Olivia delivered her opening arguments in the debate tournament's first preliminary round, Maria Gonzalez held a conference call with American's diversity and inclusion team. The VP's directive was clear: this incident would become a case study in the airline's training programs, a teachable moment institutionalized to prevent recurrence. By noon, American Airlines had issued formal lifetime bans to Richard and Patricia Whitmore. Their A-Advantage accounts, representing over 1.7 million miles in platinum status, were permanently terminated. The notification email, copied to American's legal department, cited documented fraud, bribery of airline personnel, and conduct prejudicial to safe operations as justification. Throughout the day, the company's response expanded beyond the immediate incident to address systemic issues. A seat integrity guarantee was announced, promising compensation equivalent to triple the fare difference if passengers were downgraded without consent. An independent audit of demographic patterns in involuntary downgrades was commissioned. Customer-facing staff would undergo enhanced anti-bias training developed in partnership with civil rights organizations. What had begun as one teenager's humiliation had catalyzed corporate introspection and reform that would affect millions of future passengers. The swift, comprehensive response demonstrated how thoroughly social media had transformed corporate accountability. When thousands of witnesses could document injustice in real time, old playbooks of denial and minimization no longer sufficed. By evening, as Olivia advanced to the debate tournament's second day with a perfect preliminary round record, American Airlines had transformed its failure into a case study in crisis management. The company that had failed her at the gate was now rebuilding its policies around ensuring such failures never recurred. The airline's response, while undeniably shaped by damage control imperatives, nevertheless created tangible improvements in how future passengers would be treated. Systems were being redesigned, accountability mechanisms strengthened, discrimination made more difficult to execute and easier to prevent. It wasn't perfect justice. Nothing could fully erase Olivia's initial humiliation, but it represented institutional accountability on a scale that individual remedies alone could never achieve. The debate competition. The Grand Ballroom of the Marriott Marquis had been transformed for the National Youth Forensics Championship. 8 raised platforms created individual debate stages, each surrounded by chairs for judges and observers. Tournament brackets were displayed on digital screens, updating in real time as results were entered. The atmosphere vibrated with nervous energy. Hundreds of teenagers in formal attire reviewing notes, whispering last-minute strategy with coaches, or staring into space with the 1,000-yard gaze of competitors visualizing victory. Olivia Jackson stood at the edge of the room, debate folder clutched against her navy blazer. Despite the luxury suite, the VIP treatment, and the social media explosion surrounding her name, in this space she was simply competitor number 147, assigned to preliminary round matches based on regional qualifying scores. The tournament organizers, notified of her viral incident, had taken pains to treat her exactly like every other participant, a normalcy Olivia deeply appreciated. Coach Williams approached, her expression conveying confidence rather than concern. Platform 3 for your first round. You're facing Westlake Academy from Texas. Their debater specializes in economic counter-arguments. Olivia nodded, mentally reviewing her preparation. Has she seen the videos? Do you think? Probably, boss, Williams admitted. But it doesn't matter. Once you're on that platform, nothing exists except your arguments and the judges' scorecards. Remember what got you here. The advice centered her. Before yesterday's flight, Olivia had earned this place through months of research, practice, and regional victories. The social media attention changed nothing about her preparation or capability. As she took her position on Platform 3, Olivia noted the judging panel. 3 professionals with clipboards and impassive expressions. Across from her, the Westlake competitor arranged her materials with practiced efficiency. The timekeeper signaled 1 minute until start. Olivia opened her folder, revealing the careful organization of 6 months' work, statistical analyses of contract enforcement patterns, legal precedents demonstrating disparate impacts, theoretical frameworks explaining how neutral language could produce discriminatory outcomes, and now, integrated seamlessly into her prepared arguments, elements from Flight 1108. Not as personal anecdote, but as illustrative case study, the gate agent's selective enforcement of policies, the manufactured mechanical issue, the threat of security as coercive tool. The timekeeper raised her hand. Competitors ready. The topic is systemic barriers in modern contracts. Affirmative position has 7 minutes for opening statement. Time begins now. Olivia stood, her posture reflecting the dignity that had impressed witnesses aboard Flight 1108. When she spoke, her voice carried the same calm authority that had challenged Diane Roberts' discrimination. Distinguished judges, worthy opponent, she began, establishing the formal tone expected in championship-level debate. The affirmative position asserts that modern contractual systems, while facially neutral, contain structural mechanisms that systematically disadvantage minority populations through 5 key vectors of inequity. Her opening flowed with practiced precision, building a framework that would shape the entire debate. Statistical evidence established disparate outcomes in contract enforcement across racial and socioeconomic lines. Legal analysis demonstrated how seemingly neutral terms could produce discriminatory effects when applied within existing power structures. When she reached her third point, the selective enforcement of contractual terms, Olivia integrated elements from her American Airlines experience without direct reference. Consider transportation contracts, she said, her voice steady despite the personal resonance. Studies demonstrate that providers selectively enforce terms regarding seat assignments, baggage allowances, and service recovery. When identical situations arise, discretionary enforcement shows statistically significant bias against minority customers. The example landed with particular authority, the judges unaware they were hearing analysis shaped by lived experience less than 24 hours old. As Olivia's opening statement concluded, a subtle shift had occurred in the room. Other debates continued on their platforms, but observers had drifted toward Platform 3. Something in Olivia's presentation, the unusual conviction, the precision of her examples, the maturity of her analysis had drawn attention. The opposition presented standard economic counter-arguments. Market forces would theoretically eliminate discriminatory practices through competition. Disparate outcomes reflected correlation rather than causation. Contractual freedom remained the optimal system despite imperfections. In her rebuttal period, Olivia demonstrated why she had become a championship contender. She acknowledged valid points in her opponent's position while systematically dismantling flawed assumptions. Her responses wove theory with practical reality, academic research with real-world application. My opponent suggests market forces naturally eliminate discrimination, she noted. Yet empirical evidence demonstrates persistence of bias despite competitive environment and domains. When discriminatory practices become normalized within systems, they can perpetuate even against economic self-interest of the discriminating parties. By the final statements, the audience around Platform 3 had grown substantial. Competitors from other debates, coaches seeking strategic insights, and tournament officials drawn by the growing crowd, all watching as Olivia delivered a conclusion that synthesized theory, evidence, and moral clarity. The affirmative position does not argue contracts themselves are inherently discriminatory, she summarized. Rather, we identify specific mechanisms through which facially neutral systems produce disparate outcomes. By recognizing these mechanisms, we can redesign contractual frameworks to preserve autonomy while eliminating structural bias. When time was called, the room erupted in applause, a breach of tournament etiquette that reflected the exceptional nature of the performance. The judges maintained their professional neutrality, but their vigorous note-taking suggested Olivia's arguments had landed effectively. As she gathered her materials, competitors from other schools approached with congratulations and questions. Coaches whispered assessments to their own debaters. Tournament officials made notation on their tablets. Coach Williams intercepted Olivia as she left the platform, steering her toward a quieter corner. That, she said simply, was exceptional, even for you. It felt different, Olivia admitted. Everything I've been researching for months suddenly had context. It showed. Your analysis of selective enforcement, that was informed by yesterday, wasn't it? Olivia nodded. I kept it theoretical, like you taught us. No personal references, just application of the principles. Perfect approach, Williams confirmed. The judges don't need to know your examples come from direct experience. The authority in your presentation speaks for itself. Throughout the day, Olivia advanced through preliminary rounds with consistent excellence. Her scores placed her among the top competitors, qualifying her for the championship bracket beginning tomorrow. Between rounds, other debaters approached with quiet solidarity. Many had seen the videos, though tournament decorum prevented direct discussion of external events during competition. One competitor from Phillips Exeter Academy approached during a break, her expensive blazer and confident demeanor marking her as someone from a different socioeconomic sphere than Olivia. "That was brilliant work," she said simply. "I've been researching similar topics on intersectional bias in financial contracts. Would love to compare notes sometime." The interaction, collegiate rather than condescending, represented something Olivia had rarely experienced in cross-school competitions: recognition as an intellectual peer, rather than an anomaly from an underfunded public school. By evening, tournament organizers posted the championship bracket, confirming Olivia's advancement to the quarterfinals. Coach Williams hosted a strategy session for the Roosevelt High team in a conference room provided by the hotel. While reviewing opponent tendencies and refining key arguments, she addressed the elephant in the room. "Some of you have become aware of Olivia's experience traveling here," she acknowledged. "The tournament directors have requested that all competitors maintain focus on the debate's substance rather than external events. I expect Roosevelt to set the standard for professional conduct." The team nodded understanding. Then Tanya Martinez, Roosevelt's junior varsity champion, spoke up. "We just want to say we're proud of how you handled everything. Olivia, that took serious courage." "Thanks," Olivia replied, momentarily overcome by her teammates' support. "But right now, I need to focus on tomorrow's rounds. We've got a championship to win." As the strategy session concluded, Olivia returned to her suite to refine her arguments for the quarterfinals. The city lights painted patterns across her debate materials as she incorporated insights from the day's rounds. Her phone occasionally buzzed with notifications, social media updates, messages from Grandma Elaine, communications from American Airlines, but she maintained her focus on the competition. Tomorrow she would face the country's top high school debaters in elimination rounds where a single mistake could end her championship run. The attention from Flight 1108 meant nothing on the debate platform. There, she would be judged solely on the strength of her arguments and the clarity of her presentation. And that, Olivia reflected as she finalized her preparation, was exactly how it should be. True merit evaluated without bias or preconception. The very principles she was advocating in her debate topic. As midnight approached, she closed her folders and prepared for sleep, confident in her readiness for tomorrow's challenges. Whatever happened in the championship rounds, she had already demonstrated something powerful. The same dignity and determination that had prevailed at 30,000 feet could excel on the national debate stage. Justice, it seemed, took many forms. Media coverage begins. Dawn broke over Manhattan as news vans gathered outside the Marriott marquee. What had begun as a viral social media moment had evolved into a legitimate news story, attracting coverage from local stations, national networks, and specialized outlets focused on transportation, civil rights, and corporate accountability. In the hotel's business center, Eleanor Vaughn reviewed the morning's headlines on multiple screens. The retired federal prosecutor had volunteered to monitor media coverage, allowing Olivia to focus on her debate quarterfinals. The story had expanded overnight, with distinctive patterns emerging across different platforms. CNN, Discrimination at 30,000 feet, How Social Media Forced Accountability. Fox News, Airline Faces Backlash After Seating Dispute Goes Viral. MSNBC, First Class While Black Teens Experience Highlights Transportation Inequities. Wall Street Journal, American Airlines Implements Policy Changes Following Viral Incident. New York Times, When a torn boarding pass became a symbol of resistance, the coverage revealed America's fractured information landscape. Conservative outlets emphasized passenger disruption and questioned whether the incident reflected genuine discrimination. Progressive sources contextualized Olivia's experience within broader patterns of racial bias in transportation. Business publications focused on American Airlines' crisis response and potential financial impact. Social media accelerated these divergent narratives. Jason Thompson's original TikTok had spawned thousands of reaction videos. analysis threads, and personal stories of similar experiences. The hashtag justice for Olivia had evolved to include hashtag first class while black and hashtag flying while black, connecting Olivia's individual experience to systemic patterns. Transportation experts weighed in on industry practices. Civil rights attorneys offered legal analyses. Former airline employees shared insider perspectives on gate agent discretion and oversight mechanisms. What had begun as one teenager's humiliation had become a focal point for broader conversations about accountability, bias, and corporate responsibility. Maria Gonzalez joined Eleanor in the business center, bringing coffee and pastries as peace offerings. "How bad is it?" she asked, gesturing toward the screens. "Actually, better than I expected," Eleanor replied, accepting a coffee. "The coverage is surprisingly substantive. Most outlets are focusing on systemic issues rather than sensationalizing. Americans' response is generally being received positively." Maria nodded, relieved. "We're trying to be both responsive and responsible. This morning's executive committee approved all the policy changes we discussed yesterday. We're announcing them at noon." "Smart timing," Eleanor observed. "That should help shape the next news cycle." Their conversation was interrupted by a hotel staff member. "Ms. Vaughn, there's a Ms. Roberts asking to speak with Miss Jackson. She's in the lobby." Eleanor and Maria exchanged alarmed glances. "Diane Roberts?" Maria asked, incredulous that the terminated gate agent would appear in New York. "I'll handle this," Eleanor said, gathering her notes. "Olivia needs to focus on her debate rounds. Under no circumstances should Ms. Roberts be given access to her." In the lobby, Eleanor found a woman in her late 50s sitting rigidly on a sofa, her expression a mixture of defiance and distress. Though not in uniform, Diane Roberts' decades as a gate agent had imprinted a certain bureaucratic posture that remained evident even in civilian clothing. "Ms. Roberts," Eleanor began, introducing herself formally. "Olivia Jackson is preparing for debate competition and is unavailable. I'm handling all matters related to yesterday's incident." "I flew all night to get here, Timwasi," Diane stated, an edge of desperation in her voice. "I need to explain myself, to apologize." "That's not possible at this time," Eleanor replied, maintaining professional distance. "If you wish to communicate with Miss Jackson, I suggest writing a letter that can be forwarded when appropriate." Diane's composure cracked slightly. "They fired me. 22 years with the company, terminated effective immediately. My pension, my benefits, everything, gone. Those are consequences of your actions," Eleanor noted without sympathy. "You discriminated against a minor. You destroyed federal documents. You accepted what appears to be a bribe. Each of these actions violated both company policy and potentially federal law." "It wasn't like that," Diane protested weakly. "The Whitmores are regular customers. They've always expected special treatment. It's how the system works for frequent flyers." "That explanation only compounds the problem," Eleanor observed. "You're describing systemic discrimination as standard practice." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the hotel entrance. Camera crews positioning for better angles as reporters prepared for live broadcasts. The media presence had grown substantially overnight. "I suggest you leave immediately," Eleanor advised, noting Diane's visible panic at the sight of news cameras. "Your presence here could be interpreted as harassment, which would further complicate your legal situation." As hotel security discreetly escorted Diane toward a side exit, Eleanor returned to the business center where Maria waited anxiously. "She wanted to apologize to Olivia," Eleanor reported, though it seemed motivated more by self-preservation than genuine remorse. "We had no idea she would come here," Maria assured her. "This wasn't coordinated by American." "I believe you," Eleanor acknowledged, "but it highlights the need for continued vigilance. This story is gaining momentum, not losing it." Upstairs in the competition halls, Olivia remained insulated from the growing media circus. Tournament organizers had implemented enhanced security measures, restricting access to registered participants, judges, and approved observers. Inside the competitive bubble, Olivia focused entirely on her quarterfinal preparation, unaware that her name was trending on Twitter for the second consecutive day. Outside the Marriott marquee, reporters delivered live updates against the backdrop of Times Square's electronic billboards. Local stations emphasized the New York connection. Chicago teen facing discrimination arrives for prestigious Manhattan debate competition. National outlets broaden the context. Incident highlights ongoing challenges in ensuring equal treatment in commercial transportation. Social media amplified these professional analyses with personal testimonials. Under hashtags like #MyFlyingWhileBlackStory, thousands shared similar experiences of being questioned, downgraded, or scrutinized while using transportation services. Academics and activists contextualize these modern accounts with historical patterns, from Claudette Coltz's bus protest to recent transportation discrimination lawsuits. By midday, as Olivia advanced through her quarterfinal debate round unaware of the media frenzy, American Airlines held its promised press conference. The comprehensive policy changes announced: dual verification systems for seat reassignments, prohibition of manual overrides without supervisor approval, mandatory documentation for downgrades, received cautiously positive coverage. Inside the Roosevelt High Team's preparation room, Coach Williams maintained strict media isolation. Phones were collected before strategy sessions. Outside news was filtered to prevent distraction. The team focused exclusively on argument refinement, strategic adjustments, and performance techniques. The world will still be there when the tournament ends, Williams reminded them. Right now, your only job is to represent Roosevelt with excellence. As afternoon faded into evening, Olivia's quarterfinal victory advanced her to the semifinal round scheduled for tomorrow morning. Only when competition concluded for the day did Coach Williams finally brief her on the expanding media coverage. "It's getting bigger," Williams explained gently as they shared dinner in a quiet hotel restaurant. "Multiple news outlets are requesting interviews. American Airlines announced major policy changes today, and apparently the gate agent flew to New York trying to apologize to you." Olivia set down her fork, momentarily overwhelmed. "This is a lot. You don't have to engage with any of it," Williams assured her. "Your obligation is to your team and your performance. Everything else can wait." "But maybe it shouldn't wait," Olivia said slowly, processing the implications. "If people are actually listening, if companies are changing policies, maybe there's a responsibility to speak about it. Not just for me, but for everyone who's experienced similar discrimination without cameras recording." Williams studied her star debater with evident pride. "That's a mature perspective. But remember, you're 17. Your first responsibility is to yourself and your education. The world's problems won't be solved in a day." "No, Olivia agreed. "But change happens when people speak up at the right moment. Yesterday on that plane, everyone spoke up for me. Maybe now it's my turn to speak up for others." As they concluded dinner and returned to their rooms, the media coverage continued evolving. Evening news programs featured segments analyzing the incident's broader implications. Late-night comedians incorporated references into their monologues. Online discussions explored intersections of race, class, and corporate accountability. In her suite, Olivia briefly checked social media before returning to debate preparation. Jason's original TikTok had surpassed 7 million views. The comment section overflowed with support, personal stories, and calls for systemic change. Major civil rights organizations had issued statements connecting her experience to ongoing transportation equity initiatives. The media attention represented something Olivia hadn't anticipated: a platform. Her individual experience had resonated because it illuminated broader patterns recognizable to millions. The debate skills she had cultivated for competition suddenly had potential application beyond tournament stages. Tomorrow she would compete in the national semifinal round. Her focus remained fixed on that immediate challenge, but beyond the competition lay something equally significant: an opportunity to transform personal humiliation into meaningful advocacy. As Manhattan's lights painted patterns across her debate notes, Olivia prepared not just for tomorrow's competition, but for the broader platform that awaited. The media coverage had transformed her from victim to voice, a responsibility she approached with the same thoughtful preparation she brought to her debates. Parrot wheat of consequences and justice, Richard Whitmore's Mercedes sedan pulled into the underground parking garage of Whitmore, Davis, and Blackwell at precisely 8:27 a.m. Central Time. The senior partner had flown back to Dallas on the first available flight, a middle seat in economy class that represented a dramatic downgrade from his original first-class itinerary to London. Patricia had remained in New York, refugees in a midtown hotel with no luggage and dwindling social options. The parking garage felt different this morning. The reserved space with his name stenciled in precise lettering, normally a small daily affirmation of his status, now felt like a target. He sat in his idling vehicle for several minutes, rehearsing explanations and justifications for what the firm's managing committee would have undoubtedly seen on social media. It was a misunderstanding. The gate agent was an old family friend. We had no idea the seat belonged to someone else. The girl was unnecessarily confrontational. The social media mob distorted everything. His mental preparations were interrupted by a text from Patricia. Country Club board called, emergency meeting tomorrow, regarding our membership status. This is getting serious. Richard closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the expanding consequences of what had seemed like a routine privilege just 24 hours earlier. The Whitmores had spent decades cultivating their social and professional standing in Dallas. Now the carefully constructed facade was cracking with alarming speed. The elevator ride to the 37th floor executive suite felt interminable. When the doors opened, Richard immediately sensed the atmosphere had shifted. The receptionist, normally effusive in her morning greeting, offered a tight-lipped nod without meeting his eyes. Associates passing in the hallway suddenly found their phones fascinating. His executive assistant's desk sat conspicuously empty. "She's in the conference room," said Harold Davis, the firm's co-founder and second nameplate on the door. "Everyone is—" Richard followed his senior partner down the hallway toward the main conference room. Through the glass walls, he could see the entire executive committee assembled. 8 partners seated around the mahogany table, expressions universally grim. His assistant sat in a corner taking notes, her usual smile replaced with professional detachment. "Richard," began managing partner Elizabeth Chen as he entered, "we've called this emergency session to address serious concerns about your conduct. I assume you know why we're here." "Elizabeth, I can explain," Richard started, but she raised her hand, cutting him off. "Before you speak, you should know that we've received the following since yesterday evening: 17 calls from major clients expressing concerns about ethical standards, 23 emails from peer firms regarding potential referral terminations, 41 messages from associates threatening to quit if we don't address this, and a formal inquiry from the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee." Richard paled visibly. The State Bar involvement elevated this beyond internal firm politics into potential professional consequences. "The video evidence is unambiguous," continued Arthur Blackwell, the firm's founding partner. "You were filmed attempting to intimidate airline staff, making racially charged statements, and participating in what appears to be fraud involving a minor's travel accommodations." "Arthur, that's not—" "It gets worse," Elizabeth interrupted. "We've received information that you attempted to contact the CEO directly to have the matter suppressed, and your threat to the captain about knowing who you are and being able to have his job. That's textbook abuse of perceived authority." The systematic dismantling of his excuses continued as each executive committee member addressed specific elements of his behavior. The viral video had been dissected frame by frame, his statements transcribed and analyzed, his conduct evaluated against the firm's ethics guidelines and the State Bar's professional standards. "In 27 years of legal practice," concluded senior partner James Wong, "I have never seen conduct so fundamentally at odds with our firm's values or our profession's ethical requirements." Richard's carefully prepared explanations evaporated in the face of comprehensive evidence and unanimous condemnation. His colleagues weren't interested in justifications. They had assembled to deliver consequences. Elizabeth Chen slid a document across the table. "This is a separation agreement. You will tender your immediate resignation as partner. You'll receive 60% of your capital account value, the minimum required by our partnership agreement. Your client relationships will be reassigned effective immediately. Your biography will be removed from our website by noon today." "This is absurd," Richard protested, desperation creeping into his voice. "A 30-year career ended over a misunderstanding about an airline seat. I built half the client relationships in this firm." "Oh no, Richard," Arthur Blackwell corrected, his voice carrying the weight of 5 decades in legal practice. "This isn't about an airline seat. This is about character revealed when you thought no one who mattered was watching. You threatened a captain, intimidated crew members, participated in apparent fraud, and targeted a minor, all while identifying yourself as a partner in this firm. The seat is merely where your true character became visible to 7 million viewers." The reality of his situation finally penetrated Richard's defenses. His professional identity, the foundation of his self-image for 3 decades, was being systematically dismantled in real time. The carefully constructed reputation that had opened doors, commanded respect, and justified his sense of entitlement was dissolving before his eyes. "You have until noon to clear your office," Elizabeth stated, her tone suggesting the decision was irrevocable. "Security will assist you. Your keycards will be deactivated at 12:01. If you choose not to sign the separation agreement, we'll proceed with a partnership vote for cause removal, which would reduce your capital recovery to 40% and include explicit ethics violations in the public filing." As the executive committee filed out, leaving Richard alone with the separation agreement, his phone buzzed with another text from Patricia. "Charity Gala Committee just called. They're removing us as chairs for the winter ball. Said our values no longer align with the organization's mission." What's happening? Richard. What was happening became increasingly clear as the morning progressed. While Richard packed his office under the watchful eye of 2 security personnel, the cascading professional consequences continued. His administrative assistant requested reassignment to another partner. The State Bar Association's Ethics Committee sent formal notice of an investigation. 3 major clients called to terminate their relationships personally rather than waiting for reassignment. By 11:45 a.m., Richard Whitmore's corner office, with its panoramic views of downtown Dallas and walls adorned with photographs alongside political figures, celebrities, and business leaders, had been reduced to 3 cardboard boxes. 30 years of legal practice, community leadership, and carefully cultivated influence collapsed into portable storage containers wheeled to his car by silent security personnel. As he drove away from the firm for the final time, his phone continued delivering notifications of unraveling status. The Downtown Business Leadership Council requested his resignation. The Symphony Board suggested a leave of absence. The Alumni Association withdrew an upcoming Distinguished Graduate Award. Meanwhile, Patricia Whitmore faced her own social execution in absentia. The Dallas Country Club, where the Whitmores had been fixtures for 2 decades, initiated membership review proceedings. The charity organizations where Patricia had chaired committees and hosted galas suddenly found her positions under reconsideration. Friends who had dined at their home for years were suddenly unavailable, their social calendars mysteriously full for the foreseeable future. By evening, as Richard joined Patricia in their New York hotel room, the London trip abandoned. The magnitude of their downfall was becoming clear. Their carefully constructed social identity, built on professional status, community leadership, and the appearance of ethical authority, had been revealed as a phaeton. When that facade cracked, the collapse was both comprehensive and public. "What are we going to do?" Patricia asked, her voice hollow with shock. "Everyone's abandoning us. Over an airline seat." "It's not about the seat," Richard replied, echoing Arthur Blackwell's assessment without realizing it. "It's about what people saw when we thought we could act without consequences." The Whitmores' downfall had only begun. In the days ahead, they would discover how thoroughly their actions aboard Flight 1108 had unraveled decades of careful social positioning. The professional ethics investigation would expand, financial implications would compound, their social ecosystem, built on mutual reinforcement of status and access, would continue its systematic rejection. What they had failed to understand in the moment of taking Olivia's seat was that privilege, while powerful, is ultimately conditional. When abused too visibly, when the curtain is pulled back on its arbitrary nature, the very systems that confer it can withdraw their protection with devastating efficiency. The seat they had stolen would cost them everything they truly valued, not because of the theft itself, but because of what that theft revealed about their character to a world suddenly paying very close attention. Diane's consequences. While the Whitmores faced the disintegration of their social and professional standing, Diane Roberts confronted her own cascade of consequences in a considerably less luxurious setting. The Days Inn near LaGuardia Airport had offered accommodations several tiers below her usual travel standard, but after American Airlines terminated her employment and canceled her return ticket, options were limited. The notification had arrived via corporate email at 7:23 p.m. the previous evening, while Flight 1108 was still in the air. This communication serves as official notice of employment termination, effective immediately. This action results from multiple confirmed violations of American Airlines policy, including discrimination against passengers, falsification of technical reports, destruction of federal documents, and acceptance of unauthorized gratuities. The comprehensive list of violations left no room for appeal or mitigation. After 22 years of service, Diane Roberts had been severed from American Airlines through a single paragraph of corporate legalese delivered to her inbox. Her employee ID had deactivated instantly. Her travel privileges, the most valuable perk of airline employment, vanished. Her health insurance would terminate at midnight. Her pension remained intact due to vesting requirements, but her anticipated retirement timeline collapsed along with her income security. The hotel room's small desk was covered with papers as Diane calculated her financial situation. Mortgage payments on her Dallas townhouse, car payments on the SUV she'd financed last year, credit card balances accumulated during vacation splurges. Without American Airlines' steady paycheck, the numbers didn't add up. More troubling were the regulatory consequences beginning to materialize. The Department of Transportation had initiated an investigation into potential violations of Federal Transportation Office anti-discrimination policies. The FAA was reviewing her falsification of a mechanical issue, a serious offense when documented in official capacity. Multiple passengers had filed formal complaints citing discrimination and fraud. Her phone contained 17 missed calls from reporters seeking comment. Local Dallas stations wanted interviews. National outlets requested statements. Transportation industry blogs sought insider perspective on gate agent discretion and oversight mechanisms. Diane had ignored them all, focusing instead on her increasingly desperate attempt to meet with Olivia Jackson. The compulsion to explain herself, to somehow mitigate the consequences through personal apology, had driven her to book a last-minute flight to New York using her rapidly disappearing savings. That attempt had failed spectacularly when confronted by Eleanor Vaughn in the Marriott lobby. The retired federal prosecutor had efficiently dispatched her rationalization attempts while making it abundantly clear that further contact attempts could constitute harassment with additional legal consequences. Now, alone in her budget hotel room, with CNN silently displaying coverage of her professional implosion, Diane Roberts faced the wreckage created by one moment of discriminatory action. Her phone chimed with a notification. Another former colleague withdrawing contact. American Airlines employees were distancing themselves publicly and privately, protecting their own careers from association with transportation's newest pariah. The Facebook group for DFW gate agents, once a source of daily camaraderie, had removed her membership overnight. The isolation felt particularly cruel given Diane's self-perception. In her mind, she had simply been doing what gate agents had always done, providing special accommodation to frequent flyers, maintaining the invisible hierarchy of air travel that prioritized high-value customers. The Whitmores were the kind of passengers management had always instructed her to please. Olivia Jackson, regardless of her valid ticket, didn't fit the profile of first-class passengers Diane had been conditioned to recognize. This rationalization collapsed when confronted with documentary evidence. The videos captured her clear discrimination, her fabricated mechanical issue, her visible contempt when tearing Olivia's boarding pass. Worst of all, the footage showed Patricia Whitmore slipping folded bills into Diane's pocket, a gratuity that transformed questionable customer service into potential federal bribery. A knock at the hotel room door startled her from these grim reflections. Through the peephole, Diane saw a woman in a formal suit holding identification. Not media, but something official. "Miss Roberts, I'm Special Agent Melissa Torres with the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General. I need to speak with you regarding incidents aboard American Airlines Flight 1108. The federal investigation had arrived faster than anticipated. As Diane opened the door, the administrative consequences she had been processing expanded to include potential criminal charges. Agent Torres established recording equipment on the hotel desk, formally advised Diane of her rights, and began systematic questioning about the gate incident. The interview protocol reflected serious federal interest beyond administrative review. "Ms. Roberts, did you knowingly falsify reports of a mechanical issue with Seat 2B on Flight 1108? Did you accept payment from Patricia Whitmore in exchange for reassigning Olivia Jackson's seat? Were you aware that destruction of a valid boarding pass constitutes interference with federally approved documentation?" Each question exposed the gap between Diane's rationalizations and federal transportation regulations. What she had dismissed as routine customer service flexibility was being categorized as fraud. discrimination, and potential criminal conspiracy. When Agent Torres finally departed 3 hours later, Diane Roberts understood that her employment termination represented only the beginning of cascading consequences. The federal investigation could lead to criminal charges. Civil litigation seemed inevitable. Her professional reputation within the airline industry was irreparably damaged. By evening, American Airlines had issued additional statements distancing itself from her actions. Corporate communications emphasized that Diane's behavior represented a severe violation of our values and explicit policies, and detailed the comprehensive retraining programs being implemented across all customer service positions. Industry publications that had initially framed the incident as a customer service failure were now reporting on potential criminal aspects. Aviation blogs discussed gate agent oversight mechanisms and accountability systems. Transportation equity organizations cited the incident as evidence of needed regulatory reform. As night fell over Queens, Diane Roberts faced the dismantling of her professional identity, financial security, and future prospects. The career she had built over 2 decades had unraveled in 24 hours because of one moment of discriminatory action captured on video and amplified through social media. Unlike the Whitmores, who retained wealth despite their social downfall, Diane faced potential financial ruin alongside professional disgrace. Her actions, motivated by ingrained bias and misguided customer service priorities, had destroyed the very security her career was meant to provide. The following morning, as Olivia Jackson prepared for her semifinal debate round, Diane checked out of the Days Inn and headed to LaGuardia for a return flight to Dallas. Economy class, paid from her dwindling personal funds. Her airline employee ID, now a relic of a career that would never recover. Justice for Diane Roberts looked different than for the Whitmores, but carried similar finality. The systems she had selectively enforced against Olivia had turned against her with comprehensive efficiency. The power she had wielded inappropriately at the gate had been stripped completely, leaving her facing federal investigation with rapidly diminishing resources. The seat she had reassigned would ultimately cost her career, reputation, financial stability, and potentially her freedom. Consequences proportional to both her actions and her official responsibility to treat all passengers with equal dignity and respect. Richard's professional collapse. The trajectory of Richard Whitmore's professional collapse accelerated with brutal efficiency over the 48 hours following his return to Dallas. What had begun as a partnership separation rapidly evolved into a comprehensive dismantling of his legal career. By Wednesday morning, while Olivia Jackson advanced to the debate championship final, Richard received formal notification that the State Bar of Texas had expanded its ethics investigation. The initial inquiry, focused on his behavior aboard Flight 1108, now included examination of his attempted interference with the investigation itself. The committee has received evidence, the notification stated, that you contacted multiple Bar Association members attempting to influence the preliminary review process. This represents a separate potential violation of professional conduct standards. Richard's desperate attempts to contain the damage had only expanded it. The colleagues he had called for support had reported his pressure tactics to the ethics committee. The executives he had contacted for intervention had documented his attempts to leverage relationships improperly. The network he had spent decades building was now providing evidence against him. His home office in Highland Park, a meticulously designed space featuring custom bookshelves, leather furniture, and framed achievements, became command central for his increasingly desperate damage control efforts. Stacks of legal papers surrounded his desk. His laptop displayed multiple open windows tracking social media mentions, news coverage, and professional fallout. The metrics were uniformly devastating. The original viral video had surpassed 12 million views. Professional legal organizations had issued statements condemning discriminatory behavior in the profession. The Dallas Bar Association's Diversity Committee announced a special session examining implicit bias among attorneys, a direct response to his filmed behavior. Richard's phone, once perpetually active with client calls and professional connections, remained ominously silent. The contacts who had reliably returned his calls within minutes now sent brief texts declining meetings or suggesting their assistants would find time in the coming weeks. The professional isolation was as sudden as it was complete. At 2:17 p.m., his former executive assistant forwarded an email that crystallized the comprehensive nature of his downfall. The American Bar Association's Ethics Committee had invited Olivia Jackson to address their upcoming symposium on ethical conduct in professional interactions. The 17-year-old debate champion would speak on the intersections of professional power, discrimination, and accountability, with Richard's conduct as a primary case study. The irony was excruciating. Throughout his career, Richard had presented himself as an exemplar of professional ethics. He had served on ethics panels, taught at continuing education courses on professional responsibility, and positioned himself as a standard bearer for the profession's highest ideals. Now he would feature prominently in ethics training as a cautionary example. His law firm had efficiently executed his professional excision. His biography had disappeared from their website within hours of his forced resignation. His client relationships had been reassigned to remaining partners through carefully worded transition letters that managed to explain his departure without explicit reference to the viral incident. His office had been reassigned to a recently promoted partner whose LinkedIn profile already showed the updated corner suite location. By Thursday afternoon, Richard faced the most humiliating professional consequence yet. The Texas Lawyers Quarterly, the state's premier legal profession magazine, published its monthly ethics column with the headline, "When Attorneys Abuse Perceived Authority Lessons from the Flight 1108 Incident." The article methodically dismantled Richard's behavior from legal ethics perspectives. His attempt to intimidate the flight captain, "Do you know who I am?" violated professional conduct standards prohibiting attempts to leverage professional status for personal advantage. His documented discrimination against Olivia contradicted the profession's commitment to equal treatment under law. His threat to have someone's job misrepresented his authority and violated truthfulness standards. Most devastating was the article's conclusion. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of this incident is not the individual ethical failures themselves, but the casual confidence with which they were deployed. This suggests not momentary lapse, but habitual character, the antithesis of what our profession requires. As the article circulated among Dallas legal professionals, Richard's remaining professional relationships continued their rapid dissolution. The local Inn of Court, an exclusive professional organization of judges and senior attorneys, sent a terse email requesting his resignation. The law school where he had taught as an adjunct professor for 15 years quietly removed him from the upcoming semester's teaching roster. By Friday morning, as Olivia prepared for the debate championship final in New York, Richard Whitmore sat alone in his home office confronting the comprehensive destruction of his professional identity. 3 decades of carefully constructed reputation and authority had collapsed in less than a week. The professional consequences extended beyond current relationships to include his legacy. The endowed scholarship he had established at his alma mater was being renamed. The legal clinic where he had served as board chair was reviewing leadership structure. The professional awards that had adorned his office walls now carried asterisks in the organization's online archives. At 11:42 a.m., the final professional blow arrived via certified letter. The American College of Trial Lawyers, the most prestigious invitation-only organization in his field, had convened an emergency membership review. The result was unanimous immediate termination of fellowship status. The letter specifically cited conduct inconsistent with the college's commitment to the highest standards of ethics, civility, and professionalism. For Richard Whitmore, this represented the complete excommunication from the legal profession's elite circles. The fellowship had been his most valued professional credential, more significant than his partnership, more exclusive than his bar leadership positions. Its revocation confirmed there would be no professional rehabilitation, no pathway back to his former standing. As Patricia organized their calendar, suddenly empty of galas, committee meetings, and social obligations, Richard confronted the new reality of his professional existence. The law degree remained valid. His license, pending ethics committee findings, technically allowed him to practice, but the infrastructure of relationships, reputation, and influence that had defined his career had been systematically dismantled. The professional networks that had once amplified his authority now accelerated his isolation. The colleagues who had sought his mentorship now avoided association. The reputation he had spent 30 years building had collapsed in less than 100 hours. And all of it traced back to one moment of entitlement, the decision that Olivia Jackson didn't belong in Seat 2B and that his status entitled him to take what wasn't his. That single action had revealed character flaws the legal profession found fundamentally disqualifying. As evening fell over Highland Park, Richard Whitmore, formally addressed as the distinguished counsel for the defense. Our esteemed colleague, the senior partner, sat alone in his home office with no cases to try, no clients to represent, no associates to mentor, and no professional identity to claim. His professional collapse was complete, proportional, and publicly visible. Consequences aligned perfectly with the public nature of his offense. The attorney who had built his reputation on upholding systems of justice now experienced how efficiently those systems could dismantle unworthy participants. Patricia's social downfall. While Richard navigated the wreckage of his legal career, Patricia Whitmore confronted the parallel collapse of her social empire. The infrastructure of her identity, charity boards, country club leadership, gala committees, social circles, was disintegrating with ruthless efficiency. The process began during their return flight to Dallas, as Patricia scrolled through her phone to discover 17 cancellations for their London dinner party series. The messages followed a pattern: unexpected scheduling conflict, family emergency requiring attention, regretfully must decline. The transparent excuses barely concealed the underlying message. Association with the Whitmores had become radioactive. Patricia's social capital had been built on meticulous cultivation of the right connections. For 20 years, she had navigated Dallas society with strategic precision, joining the correct committees, chairing the appropriate galas, maintaining the right friendships. Her calendar represented a carefully orchestrated performance of status and influence, each engagement reinforcing her position in the social hierarchy. That calendar now displayed an alarming pattern of empty spaces. The Dallas Symphony Guild had requested her temporary withdrawal from leadership. The Museum of Fine Arts suggested a hiatus from docent responsibilities. The Highland Park Garden Club canceled her scheduled hosting of their spring luncheon. Most devastating was the series of personal rejections from women she had considered friends. Lunch dates canceled via text, group chats suddenly silent, social media connections quietly severed. The women who had shared her shopping excursions, charity planning sessions, and country club luncheons now executed a coordinated distancing campaign. By Tuesday afternoon, as Patricia attempted to salvage her charity board positions through individual calls, the pattern became clear. Her social connections had been contingent on mutual status enhancement. When association with Patricia risked damaging others' standing, loyalty evaporated with startling speed. "I'm sorry, Patricia," explained Margot Richardson, her co-chair for the Winter Charity Ball. "But the committee voted unanimously this morning. Your recent publicity doesn't align with our mission supporting underprivileged youth. Surely you understand." The irony was excruciating. Patricia had spent decades positioning herself as a philanthropic leader supporting disadvantaged communities. Her social media featured carefully curated photographs of charity work and community service. Yet her treatment of Olivia Jackson, captured on video and viewed by millions, had revealed the profound disconnect between her public persona and private character. Wednesday brought formal notification from the Highland Park Country Club. The membership committee had convened an emergency session to review the Whitmores' standing following incidents incompatible with club values regarding dignified conduct and community respect. The committee's decision was devastating: 6-month suspension with mandatory ethics review before reinstatement consideration. For the Whitmores, the country club represented more than recreation. It was the central infrastructure of their social existence. Business relationships were maintained on the golf course. Social alliances fortified during ladies' luncheons. Status confirmed through prime dining room tables and tournament participation. The suspension effectively severed them from their primary social ecosystem, creating a visible symbol of their fall from grace. In Highland Park social circles, country club standing represented foundational status. Its withdrawal signaled comprehensive rejection from the community they had considered their natural habitat. By Thursday morning, as Olivia advanced to the debate championship finals in New York, Patricia confronted the most humiliating social consequence yet. The annual Dallas Charity Leaders publication, which traditionally featured her prominently, released its latest edition with a cover story titled "Authentic Leadership in Philanthropic Spaces." The article never mentioned Patricia by name, but its timing and content left little doubt about its inspiration. Recent events have prompted necessary conversation about authenticity in charitable work. When public performance of generosity contradicts private behavior toward the very communities such work claims to support, we must examine the underlying motivations of philanthropic leadership. Patricia's social media accounts, once showcases for her charitable activities and social prominence, became battlegrounds for public criticism. Comment sections filled with references to Flight WIFO-08. Photos of her charity work attracted questions about her treatment of Olivia. Former associates publicly distanced themselves through conspicuous unfollowing and relationship severing. The lifestyle influencer presence she had carefully cultivated, featuring designer fashion, luxury travel, and charitable glamour, imploded as brands quietly removed her from affiliate programs. The luxury retailers who had provided early access to exclusive collections stopped sending invitations. The designers who had dressed her for charity galas declined appointment requests. By Friday afternoon, as the debate championship concluded in New York, Patricia Whitmore sat alone on her Highland Park terrace, confronting the comprehensive destruction of her social identity. 2 decades of carefully cultivated status and influence had collapsed in less than a week. The invitations that had once filled their mailbox stopped arriving. The calendar that had been packed with committee meetings, luncheons, and social obligations displayed emptiness, extending months forward. The phone that had constantly chimed with texts and calls remained silent for hours at a time. Most painful was the coordinated social shunning executed by women Patricia had considered friends. These relationships, built on mutual status enhancement rather than genuine connection, dissolved immediately when association became liability. The speed and comprehensiveness of this rejection revealed how conditional her social bonds had always been. "They're acting like we committed a crime," Patricia complained to Richard over dinner that evening. "All over a misunderstanding about an airline seat." Richard, confronting his own professional devastation, replied with unexpected clarity, "It wasn't about the seat, Patricia. It was about who we revealed ourselves to be when we thought we could act without consequences. They're not rejecting us because of what happened on that plane. They're rejecting us because now they know who we really are." The observation silenced Patricia's complaints. Beneath her carefully constructed social persona, the philanthropic leader, the community volunteer, the cultural patron, had existed a person willing to humiliate a 17-year-old girl for personal convenience. The viral video had simply made visible what had always been present beneath her social performance. As night fell over Highland Park, Patricia Whitmore, formerly addressed as our distinguished chairwoman, our generous benefactor, our esteemed board member, sat alone on her terrace with no galas to chair, no committees to lead, no social calendar to manage, and no status to claim. Her social downfall was complete, proportional, and publicly visible. Consequences aligned perfectly with the public nature of her offense. The woman who had built her identity on social hierarchy and exclusivity now experienced how efficiently those systems could expel participants who violated their unwritten codes. The seat she had taken from Olivia would ultimately cost everything she truly valued, not because of the specific action itself, but because of what that action revealed about her character to a world suddenly paying very close attention. Systemic changes, while the Whitmores and Diane Roberts confronted individual consequences, a broader transformation took shape across systems that had enabled their behavior. What had begun as one teenager's humiliation catalyzed reforms extending far beyond a single flight or airline. American Airlines led these changes, converting crisis response into institutional reform. 2 weeks after Flight 1108, CEO David Mitchell addressed the company's annual leadership conference with unprecedented directness. "We failed Olivia Jackson," he acknowledged to assembled executives, managers, and department heads. Not just through one gate agent's actions, but through systems that enabled discrimination, discouraged accountability, and prioritized certain customers over basic dignity. Today, we begin fundamental reform. The reforms extended beyond the immediate policy changes announced during the crisis. American implemented a comprehensive seat integrity guarantee prohibiting involuntary downgrades without significant compensation. Gate agent discretion for seat reassignment was curtailed through mandatory supervisor approval and documentation requirements. Training programs were redesigned with civil rights organizations' input, emphasizing non-discrimination as fundamental rather than supplementary. Most significantly, American established independent oversight mechanisms. The Passenger Advocate Office operated outside normal management structures, reporting directly to the board's ethics committee. Anonymous reporting systems encouraged employees to flag potential discrimination without fear of retaliation, Quarterly audits analyzed seat assignment patterns for demographic disparities, with results publicly reported. These changes reflected a fundamental shift in corporate understanding. Recognition that discrimination wasn't merely a customer service issue but a systemic failure requiring structural intervention. Americans' comprehensive response established industry benchmarks that competitors quickly adopted. Within 30 days, Delta, United, and Southwest announced similar reforms. Within 60 days, the changes had expanded internationally, with British Airways, Lufthansa, and Singapore Airlines implementing comparable protections. The airline industry's collective response transformed one passenger's humiliation into protection for millions of future travelers. Transportation regulatory bodies accelerated existing reform initiatives. The Department of Transportation announced expanded investigation protocols for discrimination complaints, with enhanced penalties for confirmed violations. The FAA implemented strengthened oversight of gate operations, including random compliance checks for seat assignment integrity. Congress held hearings examining transportation equity, with Olivia's experience featured as a case study in discriminatory practices and accountability failures. Legal education incorporated the incident into professional ethics curricula. Law schools across the country added the Flight 108 case study to professional responsibility courses, examining how Richard Whitmore's conduct violated core ethical principles. Bar associations developed continuing education modules analyzing the boundaries of appropriate professional authority. Legal ethics journals published analyses of how privilege distorts perceptions of entitlement and authority. Corporate governance experts studied American Airlines' response as a model for crisis management and institutional reform. Business schools incorporated the case into ethics curricula, examining how corporate culture enables or prevents discriminatory practices. Diversity consultants developed training modules using Flight 108 to demonstrate how bias operates in customer service environments. Media analysis evolved from reporting the incident to examining systemic patterns. Major outlets produced investigative series on transportation discrimination, revealing Olivia's experience reflected widespread practices rather than isolated failure. Social scientists published research on how viral accountability was changing institutional behavior across industries. Communication scholars analyzed how digital documentation was transforming power dynamics between corporations and individuals. These systemic changes reflected something Olivia had articulated in her championship debate presentation: justice requires not just individual remedy, but structural reform. When systems enable discrimination through discretion without accountability, addressing individual incidents without reforming underlying structures simply perpetuates the cycle. The reforms extended beyond transportation into adjacent industries. Hotels implemented enhanced non-discrimination training for front desk staff who controlled room assignments. Restaurants reviewed seating protocols to prevent demographic steering. Event venues established monitoring systems for equitable access practices. Educational institutions incorporated Flight 108 into their curricula. High school debate programs studied Olivia's championship performance as a model for integrating personal experience into broader systemic analysis. College courses examined the incident through interdisciplinary perspectives: legal studies, sociology, media studies, business ethics. Graduate programs analyzed how social media documentation was transforming accountability mechanisms across institutions. Perhaps most significantly, the incident transformed public understanding of how discrimination operates in everyday systems. Millions who watched the viral videos recognized similar patterns in their own experiences: the selective enforcement of policies, the casual dismissal of legitimate rights, the way authority figures often assume that certain people don't belong in premium spaces. This expanded awareness created new expectations for institutional behavior. Companies faced increased pressure to establish transparent accountability mechanisms. Consumers became more attentive to equity in service delivery. Individuals gained confidence in documenting and challenging discriminatory practices, knowing viral attention could force institutional response. 6 months after Flight 1108, as Olivia began her senior year of high school with multiple college scholarship offers, these systemic changes had created tangible improvements for countless individuals who would never experience the specific discrimination she had faced. Gate agents received clearer guidelines limiting discretionary authority. Passengers gained stronger protections against arbitrary downgrading. Corporate policies established explicit non-discrimination standards with meaningful enforcement mechanisms. Legal and business professionals confronted enhanced ethical expectations regarding appropriate use of authority. The seat that Diane Roberts had reassigned and the Whitmores had taken now represented something beyond Olivia's individual experience. It had become a catalyst for institutional transformation, a case study in how systems can change when accountability becomes inescapable. As American CEO had acknowledged in his leadership address, sometimes it takes one perfectly documented failure to reveal the need for comprehensive reform. Olivia Jackson's experience exposed weaknesses we should have addressed long ago. The changes we implement today will protect thousands of passengers whose stories might otherwise never have been heard. These systemic changes represented the most far-reaching consequence of a Flight 108, not just justice for one passenger, but structural reform benefiting millions who would travel through systems permanently improved by one teenager's dignity in the face of discrimination. Olivia's triumph. The grand ballroom of the Marriott Marquis fell silent as the timekeeper raised her hand. For the final round of the National Youth Forensics Championship, the topic remains systemic barriers in modern contracts. Olivia Jackson, representing Roosevelt High School, has 7 minutes for her closing statement. Time begins now. Olivia stood at the championship podium, facing a capacity audience of competitors, coaches, judges, and observers. The semi-final victories had advanced her to this final round against Phillips Exeter Academy's champion. The culmination of 6 months' preparation now distilled to 7 crucial minutes. She surveyed the silent room, noting the 5-judge panel with their scoring rubrics. The previous segments of the debate had been technically excellent, with both competitors demonstrating mastery of theoretical frameworks and statistical evidence. But Olivia understood that championship rounds were often decided by closing statements, the final opportunity to synthesize arguments into compelling narrative. Distinguished judges, worthy opponent, honored guests, she began, her voice clear and confident. Throughout this debate, we've examined how seemingly neutral contractual systems produce discriminatory outcomes through selective enforcement, information asymmetry, and procedural complexity. Her opening established the technical foundation before pivoting to something more powerful. But beyond statistical patterns and legal frameworks lies a more fundamental truth. Systems reflect the values of those who design and control them. When those systems enable discrimination through unchecked discretion, addressing individual incidents without reforming underlying structures simply perpetuates the cycle. Without direct reference to Flight 108, Olivia incorporated insights from her experience into a broader analytical framework. She examined how contracts often empower certain parties to make unilateral modifications, how enforcement discretion creates space for bias to operate, how threats of consequences silence legitimate complaints from disadvantaged parties. Consider transportation contracts, she continued, her example resonating with particular authority given her recent experience. When a provider can unilaterally modify terms, selectively enforce conditions, or create artificial barriers to remedy, the contract becomes not an instrument of mutual agreement, but a mechanism of control. The audience remained captivated as she built toward her conclusion. The technical excellence of her earlier arguments now supported something more profound, a vision of how contractual systems could be reformed to ensure dignity alongside efficiency. The affirmative position does not argue for abandoning contractual frameworks, she emphasized, addressing potential counterarguments. Rather, we advocate for redesigning these systems with built-in accountability, transparent enforcement, and equitable remedy mechanisms. When discretionary authority can be exercised without documentation or review, those most vulnerable within the system will inevitably bear the greatest burden of that unchecked power. Her final minute synthesized the debate's technical elements into moral clarity. Contracts should reflect our highest aspirations for fair dealing, not facilitate our basest impulses toward discrimination. When we acknowledge that seemingly neutral systems often reproduce existing inequities, we can begin designing structures that fulfill the true promise of contractual relationships. Mutual benefit governed by consistent principles rather than arbitrary authority. As the timekeeper indicated her final seconds, Olivia delivered her closing with the quiet authority that had impressed witnesses aboard Flight 108. Justice requires not just individual remedy, but structural reform. And reform begins with recognizing that systems are not immutable. They are human creations that can be redesigned to reflect our evolving understanding of fairness, dignity, and equal treatment under law. The timekeeper's hands signaled conclusion. For a moment, the ballroom remained completely silent, the audience processing what they had witnessed. Then, breaking tournament protocol, applause erupted. The standing ovation spread from competitors to coaches to judges. Recognition that they had witnessed something beyond technical excellence. The judges conferred briefly, though their decision seemed evident from their reactions during Olivia's presentation. When the head judge approached the microphone, her announcement confirmed what the audience already sensed. By unanimous decision, the National Youth Forensics Championship is awarded to Olivia Jackson of Roosevelt High School, Chicago. The victory represented more than an individual achievement. It validated Roosevelt High's commitment to forensics despite limited resources. It demonstrated that excellence transcended socioeconomic barriers. It proved that determination and intellectual rigor could triumph over structural disadvantages. Coach Williams embraced Olivia as she left the platform, both women overcome with emotion. "You didn't just win," Williams whispered. "You showed them all what's possible." The championship trophy, a crystal obelisk mounted on marble, was presented alongside an envelope that would transform Olivia's future. The tournament's scholarship award provided full tuition at any participating university, a list that included several Ivy League institutions and top public research universities. As photographers captured the presentation, Olivia noticed familiar faces in the audience. Eleanor Vaughn nodded approvingly from the third row. Marcus Rivera offered a subtle thumbs up from near the exit. Several passengers from Flight 0908 had come to witness her academic triumph after supporting her through transportation discrimination. The ceremony continued with official photographs, congratulations from tournament officials, and presentations of finalist certificates. Throughout these formalities, Olivia maintained the same composed dignity that had defined her response to discrimination aboard American Airlines Flight 1108. When media were finally permitted into the ballroom, reporters approached with questions that inevitably connected her championship to her viral experience. "Olivia, how did your experience with discrimination on American Airlines influence your debate performance?" She considered the question carefully, conscious of how her response would be framed across platforms. "The principles I presented today were developed through months of research before that incident," she explained. "But personal experience can certainly deepen intellectual understanding. What happened on that flight provided concrete illustration of the abstract systems I've been studying." "Does winning the national championship feel like vindication after what you experienced?" "This victory isn't about vindication," Olivia replied with characteristic maturity. "It's about the power of voice, using academic platforms to examine systemic issues that affect real people. The debate championship and the airline incident represent different aspects of the same principle. Dignity matters. Systems can be improved, and speaking truth has purpose." As the formal ceremonies concluded, Olivia received an unexpected message. The president of Northwestern University requested a meeting in the hotel's executive lounge. When she arrived, accompanied by Coach Williams, she discovered not just Northwestern's president, but representatives from Yale, Stanford, Harvard, and Columbia. "Ms. Jackson," began Northwestern's president, "we've been following both your academic achievements and your composed response to discrimination. All of us would like to discuss scholarship opportunities beyond what you've already been awarded today." The offers presented went far beyond standard academic scholarships. These institutions weren't merely acknowledging her debate championship. They were recognizing the extraordinary poise, intellect, and character she had demonstrated throughout her viral experience and its aftermath. By evening, as Olivia celebrated with her debate team in a private dinner hosted by American Airlines, her triumph had extended beyond competitive victory to include expanded future opportunities. The discrimination that might have derailed her journey had instead amplified her voice and accelerated her trajectory. Later that night, in the privacy of her hotel suite, Olivia FaceTimed her grandmother. Elaine Jackson's face filled the screen, tears streaming freely as she absorbed her granddaughter's triumph. "You did it, baby," Elaine said, voice breaking with emotion. "You flew up front. You showed them how it's done." "I did," Olivia confirmed, finally allowing her own tears. "But I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma, without everyone who believed in me." The conversation continued with practical discussions of scholarship offers, university visits, and future decisions. But beneath these logistical matters lay something more profound: the shared understanding that Olivia's journey represented not just individual achievement, but collective aspiration. As she prepared for sleep, national championship trophy visible on the desk beside multiple scholarship offers, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary trajectory from discrimination to triumph. The seat Diane Roberts had taken from her, that the Whitmores had briefly occupied, had ultimately propelled her toward opportunities beyond what she had imagined possible. Her triumph wasn't merely winning a debate championship or receiving scholarship offers. It was demonstrating how dignity under pressure could transform humiliation into platform, discrimination into advocacy, individual injustice into systemic reform. The 17-year-old from Chicago's South Side had not just reclaimed her seat in first class. She had claimed her voice in national conversation and her place in academic excellence, achievements that would shape not just her individual future, but the systems she would eventually help redesign. 1 year later, the University of Chicago's Harper Memorial Library gleamed in May sunshine, its Gothic architecture framing perfect graduation day weather. Inside, Olivia Jackson adjusted her cap in the mirror, the blue and white honors tassel signifying her early graduation from high school with distinguished recognition. 1 year after Flight 1108, Olivia's path had evolved in extraordinary ways. The National Debate Championship had opened doors, but her composed response to discrimination had created opportunities beyond academic achievement. Universities had competed to offer specialized early admission programs. Corporations had established internships designed around her schedule. Advocacy organizations had requested her insight on transportation equity initiatives. She had ultimately selected the University of Chicago's Odyssey Scholar Program, which combined full financial support with mentorship from leading faculty. The program allowed her to begin university studies during her senior year of high school, accelerating her education while maintaining connection to her Southside community. "You ready for this?" asked Grandma Elaine, entering the preparation room in her Sunday best, pride evident in every movement. At 73, she had insisted on hosting a proper graduation celebration despite Olivia's protests about unnecessary expense. "As ready as I'll ever be," Olivia replied, smoothing her graduation gown. "Still feels surreal sometimes." "Which part?" Elaine asked, adjusting her granddaughter's cap with practiced precision. "The early admission, the scholarship, or having your story taught in business schools across the country?" Olivia smiled at her grandmother's characteristic blend of pride and practicality. "All of it, I guess. A year ago, I was just trying to get to a debate competition. Now I'm starting classes at UChicago while my friends are still finishing high school." The transformation extended beyond academics. Flight 1108 had become a case study in corporate accountability, transported discrimination, and social media's impact on institutional behavior. American Airlines had implemented the reforms promised during their crisis response, establishing industry standards for non-discrimination procedures and passenger protections. The company had also established the Olivia Jackson Transportation Equity Scholarship, providing funding for students from underrepresented communities pursuing transportation policy, civil rights law, or related fields. The first recipients would be announced during today's ceremony, with Olivia presenting the inaugural awards. Outside the preparation room, familiar faces gathered. Eleanor Vaughn had maintained contact, providing mentorship as Olivia navigated sudden public attention. Marcus Rivera had been promoted to American Airlines' newly established passenger advocacy division, implementing systems designed to prevent similar incidents. Jason Thompson's documentation of Flight 1108 had launched his career in digital journalism focused on accountability and social justice. Even the antagonist's stories had evolved in unexpected directions. Diane Roberts had ultimately pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for community service and probation. She now worked at a nonprofit transportation equity organization, using her insider knowledge to identify and address discriminatory practices in airline operations. The Whitmores had experienced comprehensive professional and social consequences, but their story had taken a surprising turn. After months of exile, Patricia Whitmore had begun speaking to community groups about privilege, entitlement, and accountability. Richard had established a legal clinic providing representation to transportation discrimination victims, working to rebuild his reputation through genuine service rather than social performance. These transformations reflected something deeper than individual consequences. Flight 1108 had created a focal point for examining how discrimination operates in everyday systems and how accountability can drive meaningful reform. The incident had generated conversations in corporate boardrooms, university classrooms, policy discussions, and family dinner tables. As graduation attendees took their seats, Olivia prepared to address the audience. Her speech would thank those who had supported her journey while emphasizing the broader significance of what had occurred aboard that flight from Dallas to New York. This isn't just my story, but as she had written in her prepared remarks, it's about what happens when we stand up to discrimination, when we document injustice, when we demand better from our institutions. What happened on that plane revealed problems much bigger than one-seat assignment, and the changes that followed will protect passengers who will never know their rights were strengthened by this incident. The ceremony coordinator signaled it was time to proceed. Olivia took a deep breath, centered herself, and moved toward the auditorium entrance. The applause that greeted her appearance carried recognition beyond academic achievement, appreciation for how one teenager's dignity under pressure had created ripples of positive change. As she crossed the stage to begin her address, Olivia carried more than academic honors. She carried the vindication of her community's faith, the fulfillment of her grandmother's instruction to show them how it's done, and the responsibility of a platform created through adversity transformed into advocacy. 1 year after Diane Roberts tore her boarding pass in two, Olivia Jackson had not just reclaimed her rightful seat, she had created a new path forward for herself, for future passengers, and for systems finally forced to recognize that dignity wasn't a privilege for some but a right for all. Have you ever witnessed strangers coming together to right a wrong? The power of community response shown in Olivia's story happens more often than we might think. Ordinary people choosing to stand against injustice, whether through documenting what they witness, speaking up when others remain silent, or simply refusing to be complicit in discrimination, can transform individual incidents into meaningful change. Your voice matters in these moments. When you observe discrimination, your decision to document, to speak, or to support can make the difference between isolated injustice and systemic accountability. The passengers of Flight 1108 demonstrated how collective witness can transform power dynamics and create consequences for behavior that might otherwise continue unchallenged. Share your experiences of witnessing communities stand together for what's right. Your story might inspire others to find their voice when they encounter similar situations. Together, we create the expectation that dignity isn't negotiable and that justice requires both individual remedy and structural reform. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories of justice and transformation to light. Remember that change happens not just through dramatic confrontations, but through everyday decisions to document, speak up, and stand together against discrimination in all its forms. Olivia Jackson boarded a flight expecting nothing more than transportation to her debate competition. Instead, she became the catalyst for a movement that transformed airline policies, corporate accountability mechanisms, and public understanding of transportation discrimination. Her journey reminds us that sometimes our most powerful moments come not from seeking the spotlight, but from maintaining our dignity when others attempt to diminish it. When Olivia's grandmother told her to fly up front and show them how it's done, she couldn't have anticipated how thoroughly her granddaughter would fulfill that instruction. By standing firm in her right to occupy the space she had earned, Olivia demonstrated something profound about justice in everyday spaces. That it often begins with one person refusing to accept discrimination as inevitable, even when confronting systems designed to silence their objection. The next time you witness injustice, remember Flight 1108. Remember that you are never truly alone when standing for what's right. Someone is always watching, someone is always recording, and someone is always ready to stand beside you when you choose dignity over surrender.